Notre Dame fans, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast. Is it Wednesday?
No,
it's Thursday.
Oh, no.
I'm sorry, Vince. What day is it? Friday. Okay. We have had people request for firings if you sing again. But we've also had somebody else request that you would do like a new intro song with you singing, which I'm going to go out and say is not going to happen.
Yeah.
But it is Friday.
Here,
Vince,
so
it is Friday. And that means it's time to bring up the Friday mailbag. You got to come on, man. Where you at, buddy? Get the thing down there. Where you at, man?
I'm on it. It's right here.
Boom. Okay, got the Friday free-for-all mailbag. That means today we're going to talk about whatever you want to talk about. But before we begin, we have two bits of business two thank yous that we want to do. Number one, Ben Elijah, before the chat even started with the $20 super chat. Ben, thank you so very much. He says, thanks, Brian and Vince, for the awesome job you guys do. I watch your podcast daily. Thank you.
That's awesome.
Most of the time it is replays because of my work schedule. Question, which 2023 recruits do you think will end up Irish at running back, quarterback, and receiver? Ben, that's going to be the first question that we answer. But before we get to the questions, we have something else that I wanted to say thanks. I have not been given permission to give this person's name out yet. I'm hoping to hear back and that they'll allow me to give them the public credit that they deserve. But we have a new super chat record. And it was not through YouTube because, as you all know, there's other ways to support Irish Breakdown. But we had someone join the Gold Club, which is a $200 donation to the Irish Breakdown message board, but then also re-upped with an extra $300. So they ended up giving a $500 donation to which is huge because now I have the money to go hire a photographer for the Florida State game, which again, that's how that stuff helps, right? So when when you guys help us out, it doesn't like, hey, Brian and Angela going on a date tonight. We reinvest it back into Irish Breakdown and to make sure that our product is better for you. And it is incredibly humbling, incredibly thankful. And that person also then went and bought some Built Bars. So it was a good night. Good night.
That's good stuff.
Thank you for that. And look, any donation that you give, $5, $500, it's appreciated.
Adds up,
and
man.
it all makes this a fun place to be at. And for people who can't give super chats, you're loved and appreciated too, because that's what this thing is all about. You know, people give out of their means, and some people have more, some people have less, but being a part of the community is the big part of it. And that's where it comes from. And so we just wanted to kind of kick the show off. Vince and I just say thank you all so much.
That's awesome.
For where we're at. I mean, Vince and I, we've talked recently again about what our goals were, where we thought we'd be by the time football season started. And then where we actually are is just, it's night and day. I mean, we're not even close to where we thought we were, meaning we said bye-bye to what our goals were like months ago.
Yeah,
where we thought we'd be.
Yes.
So, and that's because of you all.
No doubt.
So thank you. Thank you so much for that. And so Ben Elijah, Vince, let's go ahead and get this thing kicked off.
Yeah, let's do this. So as a re-ask of the question, he says, which top 2023 recruits do you think will end up Irish? The skill positions, basically, offensively, running back, quarterback, and wide receiver. I know who I want at quarterback, Brian. That's Dante Moore. And I think Notre Dame is in a great position with him from everything that I've heard and everything that I've read and everything that you've told me. And I hesitate to say the name of that other quarterback in the 23 class that everybody keeps bringing up. But I want Dante Moore. Like, I don't, if it's just quarterback A and quarterback B, right? And there's no name attached to it. If we're just looking at production and physical talent and all of that, I want Dante Moore. Like, that's who I want. And I think Notre Dame is in a great position for him.
Yeah, I think they're in a really good spot. I wouldn't say great. I'd say really good. I think they're right in there with a couple other schools like Ohio State and Michigan. I think that I would give them the advantage over Ohio State just right now, simply because of what Ohio State has added to their roster in the 2021 and 2022 classes. So, but I like where Notre Dame is at. The key for Dante Moore is going to have to be they're going to have to go out this year and put the kind of product on the field that makes him want to come. And that's what it's going to boil down to. And that's one of the things I'm most excited about when I think about this offense is, maybe it could have an impact on, maybe some of the 2022 guys that are left on the board. I don't really know if it will, because I think pretty much with the exception of offensive line, I think that they've already got the guys that they need to convince. Now it's about them deciding, do we want Xavier Bradshaw? Do we want Major Everhart, and those are guys that I think Notre Dame might have a great shot with if they put the press on. So the guys that they really wanted, they have. Now, could it help with keeping guys? Sure. If you go out there and you don't throw the ball very well, is it going to make it a little easier for some schools like Oklahoma, which, for example, is Tobias Merriweather's dream school, and they have now lost like 3 of their 2022 receiver recruits because Luther Burden, which is a 5-star kid, just recently decommitted.
Wow.
So you got to put a good product on the field. But I think where it's really going to help Notre Dame is 2023. And I think with Dante Moore. But there's other quarterbacks on the board, and this is what I like about what Tommy Rees is doing with this class is he's not all the chips in the Dante Moore basket, and if you strike out, you're going to be left with some 3-star kid that you hope is going to be a good player.
Right.
They're already recruiting other quarterbacks. They're recruiting Avery Johnson, who's a top 150 caliber guy to me. They're recruiting Jackson Arnold, who had a great first game of the season last night for Denton Geyer down in Texas. He was not a starter in the past because the starter at that high school is now at Texas A&M.
Right.
So, he's one and that's going to happen when you're talking about sophomores, right?
The rich get richer, man. That's
right. And so, Jackson Arnold's a guy that's on Notre Dame's radar. So there's other guys on the radar, but Dante Moore knows full well that he is QB1 for Notre Dame. And I think the staff is doing a great job of making sure they communicate that to him. So I'm going to be curious to see if he gets back on campus. As far as a running back, honestly, right now, Ben, I don't have a name that I could look at and say, yep, that's the guy they're going to get. I think right now the running back that I think they have the best chance on is the guy that I don't actually think is going to stay at running back. And I'm trying to remember that kid's name, Ben. So I'm going to pull up
that big kid
from Illinois.
Yeah.
I'm trying.
I can't remember his name either. I just remember he was over. What you're saying is he's going to be oversized, almost too big to be a running back when it's all said and done. Potentially.
Yeah, I think that's a legitimate concern. I think that's a legitimate concern at this point in time. He's a really long, athletic kid, really talented kid, but I think a kid that eventually is going to outgrow the running back position. So. I think Fegan is his name. I think I can't believe I'm drawing a blank here, but he was a kid that impressed Notre Dame this summer. And then, of course, at receiver, it's going to be about you're looking for elite players only at this point in time,
right.
and or top players only. The 2 guys that are at the very top of my board that I think Notre Dame has a legitimate shot at are Cardinal Tate, obviously, who's from Chicago, but he's now at IMG Academy, but originally from Chicago. It's Ohio State, Notre Dame. Most analysts are predicting Ohio State. Myself, I believe Tom Loy still has his crystal ball on Notre Dame and has updated that recently. Tom and I haven't talked about that in a while, but I believe he still has his crystal ball on Notre Dame. I still think it's going to be Notre Dame. We'll have to see how it plays out, but that's where I'm at right now. So they're going to have to close. It's a big one for Coach Alexander, right? You've got some momentum going. You got Dante, you got Tobias Merriweather, you got CJ Williams. You got to keep it rolling. You can't miss out on a top 50 local kid. You just can't. Chicago is Notre Dame.
That's local. That's
Notre Dame territory.
Yes.
Right. So
they used to be undefeated in Chicago back in the day, man. They could just walk in and just
Catholic school.
Exactly. Right. Just like, I want you. Let's go. Like that's how it used to be in Chicago.
And they got to get back to that. And Cardinal takes a big part of that. So I think Cardinal's the must get there. He is cute. He's WR1, right? People like to do these, things now. He's top wide receiver on the board for me. Another guy that I love that Notre Dame has a shot with. Now, again, it's going to be a tougher shot. They're a longer shot, but they're in it with is Jaylen Brown, the kid from Miami. Now, he goes to Gulliver Prep, and he doesn't go to Gulliver Prep to play football. Okay, you don't go to Gulliver Prep to play football. You go to Gulliver Prep because you have a family that says, no, you're going to get an education that's top-notch as well as playing football. And there's a lot of interest in Notre Dame. Now, will he go all the way from Miami up north to Notre Dame? It's a good question, but there's a shot. When you're a kid from Miami and you come to Notre Dame before your junior year on your own dime, you're interested in Notre Dame.
Right.
And that is what happened with Jaylen Brown. There's some other guys on the board to keep an eye on. There's Malik Elzy, a kid from Illinois, another Chicago kid. I believe he went to Simeon, but 6'3", 195, big kid, really good football player. Rodney Gallagher from Pennsylvania is a kid that's on Notre Dame's radar. Nathaniel Joseph is going to be committing soon. I don't think it's going to be to Notre Dame, but until then, he's on there. Noah Rogers is a kid from North Carolina that I like. So there's some Micah Tees from Oklahoma, who I would expect to go to Oklahoma, but so far he hasn't. He's another guy that's on the board for Notre Dame right now. But I expect that board to expand. But right now, Cardinal Tate and Jalen Brown, for me, I believe, are the top 2 QBs on the board for Notre Dame. And that's guys that I would have my eye on.
We had another super chat, Brian, if you want to go down and grab that real quick.
Yes. From Brandon. Here we go.
What's up, my man? Thank you very much. Awesome. He says, as of right now, before any games have been played, what senior receivers could you see coming back next year? That's a really good question because do all of them have eligibility, right?
Yeah.
So they all could come back.
The one that's a big question mark for me is Kevin Austin. And the reason I say that is because to come back for a 5th year at Notre Dame, you have to pass through the school.
You have to be asked back by the school, not just
which has nothing to do with football. And that's not one that Brian Kelly has a lot of sway over. And so at least he hasn't in the past. Obviously with Kevin being suspended for a year, but here's why I'm confident that it could happen is Kevin's suspension in 2019 was not an academic suspension. It was not a any kind of like domestics, dispute. There wasn't anything involving a female, or it was extracurricular activities, right? If Javon McKinley got brought back for what he did, then I would think Kevin did. But here's the question. Javon, outside of that one event where Javon got arrested, he was a great student. And I don't know where Kevin is at academically. It's literally, it's a lack of knowledge. I don't know what kind of grades Kevin has. So if he does well in the classroom, he may have a shot to come back. But that's the only one, Vince, that's the caveat. But they're all eligible football-wise to come back next year. If you want to continue with your answer.
Yeah, so I would love to see him come back because I think 1 year – now, I guess I'm contradicting myself because there are guys that have parlayed 1 year of really good production into the NFL. I mean, we've seen it in the past couple of years, right? With Miles Boykin and Javon McKinley, right? So there you go. Caden Fegan was the big running back. Yes. But I would like to see him come back because I think he needs another year. I think he needs another year in this system. I think he needs another year of all of it. So I would like to see him come back. I don't see Braden Lindsey coming back. I feel like he's been around for a really long time. And with the injury concerns, I feel like he would be ready to kind of get things moving.
And I feel that way about Kevin Austin too. I feel like both of them, if you have a healthy, successful season, do you really want to take a chance of coming back and get hurt again next year? Yeah. That would be my concern with both of them.
Well, and from a depth standpoint,
test well enough to they can test well enough to overcome the legitimate red flags that you have, Vince, about Kevin. I mean, experience is an important thing, right?
It is. Yeah, it is. Then you're talking what Avery Davis and Lawrence Keys, right? So, what would they be able to come back? What would that look like? I would love to have the leadership of Avery Davis back. But I don't know what else he could prove.
So he could come back for a 6th year because of COVID. Avery Davis technically could come back. I don't anticipate him coming back. Right.
I don't know what more he has to prove, to be honest with you. I think he's going to have a good year this year.
He is what he is for the most part.
Right. Exactly. I think maybe Lawrence Keys, if depending on what kind of year he has, if he's overshadowed by Avery Davis, I could see potentially maybe him coming back as a starter.
I think he probably comes back either way, just because there's more question marks about him at the next level, size-wise and things like that.
Right.
I think to me, it's Joe Wilkins and Lawrence Keys are the ones I'm most confident come back.
Okay.
I just feel like, if Braden Lindsey can't stay healthy, do you really want to invest all the time into him again next year only to have him get hurt again? That would be my concern from the Notre Dame side of things. On the Braden Lindsey side of things, if you're healthy this year, do you want to risk coming back next year and getting hurt again? He's going to test extremely well. And here's the difference between Braden and Kevin Austin. Braden has been successful in the past. Braden has 2019 film he can show to teams. It's not like he was a one-year wonder. It's like when he's healthy, he balls out. That's Braden Lindsey's story. And that's not going to go away if he comes back in 2022 as well. Right. It's still going to be the same thing for NFL teams. Can he stay healthy? But he's going to test exceptionally well. And if he has a big year, then I could see him going. Yeah. Same thing with Kevin Austin. I think Keys and Joe Wilkins probably are guys that I could see coming back. And prior to the summer, I would have said, no way you bring Joe Wilkins back. But with the loss of Jordan Johnson and Jay Bramlett and Kendall Everahman and Micah Jones, you now have more room to actually be comfortable bringing Joe Wilkins back. And the thing that Joe Wilkins brings, he's never going to be a star, in my opinion. And if he is, great. That's awesome. I'm glad. Hope he proves me wrong, but I don't think he ever will be. But I think Joe is a tremendous worker and a really good kid, and he would give them much needed leadership in 2022 that I hadn't really. I think needs to be discussed, because otherwise, who's your lead? If everybody but Keys is gone, who's your captain of that position?
That's a good point, because it's all kids. It's all young kids in there now.
Xavier Watts would be the second most oldest guy on the roster at that point in time. You know what I mean?
And we were just talking about him as a true freshman. I mean, he's a redshirt freshman this year. Yeah.
Right. So that's where I think Joe could bring some value and say, hey, look, he doesn't have to be the next Kevin Austin or the next Miles Boykin. Not everybody needs to be that guy, or Chase Claypool, but sometimes there's value in bringing back a guy who's a veteran leader who is going to bring just that leadership, work ethic. Hey, you better match my work today. You know what I mean? And I think there's value to that, especially when you think about the fact that I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that some of those freshmen can come in, Tobias Merriweather, CJ Williams, and help right away.
Sure.
You're definitely going to want a couple veterans, not just Lawrence, but you're going to want a couple veterans that are going to be there to say, hey, look, this is how you do it. This is how you play receiver at Notre Dame. So that's why I think Lawrence. I'm thinking Joe. If you'd asked me this 2 months ago, Vince, I'd have been, there's no way you bring Joe Wilkins back.
Right.
You can't.
Right.
To me, you don't bring fifth-year seniors back unless they're going to be the guy. You know, and my attitude on that has changed a little bit.
Let me play devil's advocate here and ask you a question. Do you think bringing back Joe Wilkins, and I tend to agree with everything you said from a leadership standpoint, but do you think bringing him back is in any way a impediment to the development of some of those younger guys?
No, it's only if they're going to say, hey, he's going to play no matter what. I mean, you know, but if they do what we think we're going to do, all of this is working with the assumption that they're going to play 5 guys a game. Right.
True.
So no, I think if anything, it helps their development, because again, there's value in having that tone setter, that guy that shows those young kids. Again, if he's gone, if Austin's gone, if Keys is gone, if Lindsey's gone, if Avery Davis is gone, who's showing these young kids how to go about their business?
Sure.
Right. So that's where I'm coming. I think it helps them. Now, if they're just going to say, hey, look, he's going to play 60 snaps a game, no matter how much better Tobias Merriweather or Deion Colsey might be over him, then yeah, that's problematic. But if that's their attitude, they're going to bring him back anyway.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, good point.
Right. So it really doesn't matter. We have a couple more super chats.
Yeah, we do. Yes,
Brett Smith says, fellas, my partner and I are working a 24-hour shift on the ambulance. Mind reminding my buddy Matt Romero how old he is for me. And that is a response to Matt Romero saying he's working a 24-hour shift on my birthday like a sucker. My only wish is for Vince to hit some of those high notes today.
Whoa.
I don't know if Vince has high notes. Have you heard his voice?
Yeah.
Vince is like a baritone through and through. I don't know if Vince can hit some high notes.
You hit those falsetto notes like when I'm jamming out in the car or something, and my wife gets mad at me every time. Like, she's like, stop.
Oh, you sing with your spouse in the car? See, I only sing when I'm by myself.
Because I've gotten in trouble so many times, it just doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah, that's very sad. Very sad. But Brett Smith, thank you so much for the super chat. Man. And
awesome.
you know, thank you for serving your community, man. I appreciate that very much.
Yeah.
My wife used to be an EMT, and so she's told me about what those shifts are like. They're not easy. They're not easy at all. So we appreciate what you do very, very much. And happy birthday to Matt Romero, our guy Matt Romero. Matt,
yeah, man.
Matt, remember Vince, the picture I sent you of the guy listening to the show with the IB hat on and the white IB gap closers? That's Matt Romero.
Nice. That's awesome.
We appreciate that, and we appreciate you checking in. 2 guys working 24-hour shifts that are making time to listen to our show.
That's great.
That's awesome.
Don't get distracted.
That's awesome.
It's so much more important
fault.
Stuff
he was talking about Dante Moore, and I got distracted. Bam! You know, don't blame me for that. Okay. And then we also have a super chat from Bronx ND fan. Appreciate that very much.
Yeah, man.
Bronx ND fan asks, as a lifelong New York Jets fan, I can't help but wonder if Zach Wilson was ever on Notre Dame's radar during his high school career. Seems like he would have been a good fit. Keep up the great work. I never heard of Zach Wilson until he started playing at BYU.
I honestly didn't hear of him until last year when BYU was getting all the pub for playing the schedule that they played. And
right.
how they were playing.
And his offer lists were BYU, Boise State, Fresno, Hawaii, schools like that. The only Power 5 schools to offer him were like Cal, Iowa, Minnesota, Oregon State, Syracuse. The other thing to remember is he was a 2018 signee. Notre Dame had their 2018 quarterback committed in 2016. That's Phil Jurkovec.
Yeah,
so there wasn't anybody on their radar in 2018 outside of Phil Jurkovec. And so, they weren't. But no, he was not a national recruit. He was not a guy that you would – if Notre Dame would have signed him coming out of high school, people that follow recruiting would have lost their minds. He was the lowest ranked 3-star kid, in Rivals. He was a 5.5 3-star kid, right? And his offer list would have been very underwhelming. And then if you look at 247 Sports, he was ranked as the number 958 player in the country. He was ranked as the number 13 player in the state of Utah.
Yeah,
Utah, not a state known for producing a bunch of top 100 players.
Well, and if you look at his offer list, it was regional, right? I mean, it's
with the exception of Syracuse and Iowa and Minnesota. But those are schools that have to go try to find somewhere else to find quarterbacks.
Exactly. They have to use services, and they have to not necessarily services, but they have to follow a different path than some of the big Power 5 schools.
Right. Best way to put it. Yeah, he and again, it points to the number 2 pick in the draft was the number 958 player in the country.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
I'm just saying.
Yeah.
A little burp issue. The number 3 player in the draft, Trey Lance, was the number 2005 player in the country in the 2018 class. Just want to make sure I remind people of that because stars matter, right? So those are 2 guys Notre Dame fans would have lost their minds if the staff would have offered and taken in 2018, and they turned out to be pretty good players. Although who knows if they would have been developed as such at Notre Dame, they'd have been sitting behind Ian Book the last 3 years. So and that's truth. That's truth.
I know it's true.
That's true.
I know it's true.
All right. Tommy Guns with a super chat. 3 guys on a 24-hour shift. There's somebody else that I missed that I didn't see yet that's on a 24-hour shift. So I appreciate that very, very much.
Putting in work, man.
Yeah. So, Vince, awesome. I'm already bumped down to 12:04. So
I'm
you want to go ahead and get started on
12:04. That's the first one. 12:04 is the first one.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah, I was like, wait a minute. I'm at 12:04 too. Okay. All right. So I'm going to throw this one up. So our first question of the day comes from SkyShark425. Rewatching the breakdown of Marcus Freeman's defense, does his hiring represent a program modernization by BK? More behind-the-scenes guys, more involvement by BK in recruiting, etc. I think this is a good question because we've actually talked a lot about this, and I think the hiring of Marcus Freeman is all part and parcel with kind of a gradual change that is sped up, I would say, in the last 9 months to a year. Brian, they have been adding more guys and more. Well, I shouldn't say more guys, more people to the behind the scenes operations when it comes to recruiting. Brian Kelly has been a lot more involved in recruiting. I agree with you. I think Marcus Freeman's hiring was like the first big splash that said that, but I believe that was.
That had to happen for Kelly to be willing to make the splash to begin with. But I do now. Here's the other thing. I do, Vince, think that there were conversations on Marcus Freeman's end saying, if I'm going to come here, this needs to happen.
Smart,
which is absolutely smart. So the expanding of the recruiting operation, that's a request that Marcus Freeman made,
and we
Brian
know that
Kelly answered it. Right. That's huge. And that's what tells me that Marcus Freeman, again. My stance on Marcus Freeman as the next head coach, can we just let him coach a game first, please?
Absolutely.
Right? However, there's a reason that I wanted him so bad when he got hired, and there's a reason that I'm optimistic that he's going to prove himself to be capable of being the next head coach, and that is it's not just about, give me the money. It's not just about, Notre Dame just in general positions me for the next job. It's, hey, if I'm going to be successful here are the things that we need as a program to be successful. That's thinking like a head coach.
Yeah.
Hey, I need Chad Bowden in that job. And then we need to open it up for offense. We need to invest more money in the recruiting operation. We got to do this. We got to do that. Those are things that a head coach needs to be thinking about.
Yeah. And I need my head coach to close on recruits and, all that stuff. I think that was all part of the conversation. I really do.
And Brian Kelly being willing to do that is part of it. Yes. And Brian Kelly, again, Brian Kelly's always going to be the one driving the bus. there may be times that Tommy Rees or Marcus Freeman or Mike Elston are saying, hey, coach, you might want to make a left there, or you might want to take a right at this next one, right? But it's always Brian Kelly driving the bus. And he has to be willing to put foot on the gas. And that's the thing is Brian Kelly's kind of, just, we're going to go to speed limit. And now, we can't do that. We can't, but now it's like, okay, foot on the gas, let's go.
Yeah.
And that's been the exciting. And look, I think if you were to take each one of these individual things, the Marcus Freeman hire, the expansion of the recruiting operation, putting Mike Elston back in charge of recruiting, being able to keep Kerry Cooks as hiring a mid-20-something guy in Chris O'Leary, but yet still being able to keep Kerry Cooks on staff as an analyst, that's an undervalued, mentioned huge plus for Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's just been so many of those things, the NIL stuff that they've embraced so well. There's just been thing after thing that if you just kind of look at it, letting Tommy Rees Tommy Rees has been more in control of this offense this year, from what I'm told, than he has been in the past. Each one individually is okay. It is what it is. The reason the excitement that I get, Vince, it comes from the collective. Right. It comes from you stringing them all together. And that tells me one of them could just be an isolated thing. Okay, yeah, he knew he needed a big-time defensive coordinator. Of course he hired Marcus Freeman. That by itself, well, yeah, okay, put Mike Elston in charge of recruiting, whatever. Isolated by themselves, they're just moves that most teams make. Sure. When you put them all together into one offseason, it's evidence to me that Brian Kelly says, you know what? We're freaking close. And we're the problem. It's not the administration. It's not no. And here's something else that's happened. This is something that I've had several sources tell me about this offseason. In the past, Brian Kelly has used some of the unique aspects of Notre Dame as an excuse. Publicly, this isn't just recruiting. I mean, think about after the Stanford game in 2017. I had 2 Notre Dame coaches call me after that game that were pissed off about when Brian Kelly said, "Oh, we're tired. We had a lot of travel." They were pissed because they're like, "You're giving these kids an excuse." Like there were so many built-in excuses for Notre Dame players to just grab on. Well, it's that, and that's the thing. It's like, oh, it's so much tougher,
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Whereas now, what I'm told is Brian Kelly has adopted an approach that I think worked so well for Coach Holtz during his tenure, which is embracing the struggle in that this is what's going to make you better. No excuses. This is going to make you better. Nobody else is going to class like you are. Nobody else is doing this. Nobody else is doing that. He's now embracing what makes Notre Dame unique, not using it as excuse and saying, we're going to actually mentally convince you that this is going to make you tougher. That's a change. That's a big change.
Well, yeah, and they're using terminology like 5-star students. Like you're going to be in class with 5-star students, and then you're going to be on the field with 5-star. Yeah,
yes,
it's like, they're using it.
That's a word, but it's more of just the day-to-day, in the meetings, in the weight room, on the field, which is, hey, you're working harder than anybody else. Nobody can match what you're doing right now. And it's that mental game that head coaches have to. That's what Lou Holtz was a master at. An absolute master at. And that's been one of the frustrations I've had with Coach Kelly is you're kind of using what makes Notre Dame unique and harder, and you're using it as an excuse not to thrive or not to play to the you know what, my kids are having to do more. Now he's embracing it.
Right.
And he's talked kind of about that a little bit, but I'm hearing a lot behind the scenes that they're using that to make these players taking away the excuses and saying, hey, look, this is why you came here. This is why we're going to win a championship, as opposed to it used to be sort of the reason it used to be these are the things that were keeping us from it. Now he's embracing it to saying this is what's going to fuel us to it. And I think all that's because at the end of the day, after the Clemson and Alabama games, he said, we're not that far away. I truly believe after he got over the anger of the loss and sat down and watched the film and he realized, you know what, guys, we're not that far away. This isn't 2012. This isn't 2015 against Ohio State, where it's just like, I mean, they got 19 first-round draft picks running all over the field. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Right. You're just like, we're here.
Right. This is different. I truly believe that they look at it and say, we're close. There's some things we got to do different, but we're close.
Yeah.
And I think that's my excitement. But this is such a great question because it spawned such a long answer.
Right.
It really is at the heart of where my optimism comes for this season and then seasons to follow is That had to change. Or at the end of the day, Marcus Freeman and recruiting, all that other stuff, at the end of the day, wasn't going to lead to a championship if this right here, if what we just talked about didn't change. And that's where my excitement, honestly, at the end of the day comes from.
We got a lot of comments in here early. Let's see. Tommy Guns, I think he's the one on the 24-hour shifts. Is going 28 hours strong as of right now. So I think he's the third would be my guess on that one.
Because Tommy is I believe, a long-haul trucker.
Oh, yeah. Do not envy that. I'm not good for long distances.
Yeah. And he says, Brian, you get the tickets. I got the steering wheel for FSU. So I actually was able to get a flight. I was able to find a flight. So it actually worked out pretty cool. I'm actually going to be flying into Georgia on Friday night before the FSU game. I did not know this, but my cousin is still stationed in the Air Force down in Valdosta. So I'm actually going to go and stay with her and her family, and then drive to it's only like an hour and a half from Tallahassee. So that worked out pretty well. So I will actually be flying down. And so I was going to, Vince, you remember, I was going to originally make the drive.
Yeah, well, I remember.
And I offered to have you go with me, but as you just admitted, you're kind of struggle making those long trips.
I do.
So
Mace AK, we were talking about running back recruits in the 23 class, and he says Justice Hayes from Georgia, number one running back on Rivals, likes ND a lot. Yeah,
I think he likes Notre Dame a lot, but I'm not ready to say that they're going to get him right now, to be honest with you. I mean, Cedric Irvin Jr. likes Notre Dame a lot. There's backs that like Notre Dame, but they haven't shown that they can close on their top guy the last couple of years.
True.
And that's my issue with that. And then real quick, Irish Cubby says, last weekend before the season, we are almost to a game week. Go Irish. And it's the last weekend before Notre Dame starts the season. But there are football games tomorrow. And I've never been so excited about a Nebraska-Illinois game in my life. We actually have 2 game prediction threads or stories on the front page, or on Irish Breakdown. One is Nebraska-Illinois, where all of our staff, and we had, I think, 6 guys making predictions this year, because our staff is now up to 8 people. Yeah. That are just, I mean, again, one guy's doing a couple articles. The guy, so we're really excited about what we're doing. And so we had our predictions for those 2 games up on the website, and there will be games this weekend. I'm excited about it. I cannot wait. Hawaii, UCLA, I'll be watching it. I'm excited about it. Because it's football. Football's back, and so I'm really fired up about that. Great. We're now 9 days away from Notre Dame kicking off the 2021 season.
Can't get here too soon. It cannot get here too soon.
Insane.
Tim Sully says, I took the over 8.5 wins. Looks like easy money. Your thoughts?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm not a betting guy, but because again, that's regular season. I'll be shocked if Notre Dame's not. 9-3 would be considered disappointing to me.
Yes,
with this football.
Oh,
team.
Yes, and you're still winning that bet.
Yeah, you'd have to lose to Cincinnati or Wisconsin, Virginia Tech, right? Just for example, and plus then you'd have to lose a home game. I don't see that happening. And I don't see the flip side of them losing multiple home games. This team hasn't lost a home game since 2017, and that was by a point to the national runners-up. And all of a sudden they're going to lose to Wisconsin, Cincinnati and North Carolina. I don't see it. I don't think they're going to go undefeated just because that's so hard to do. But we'll get into that more tomorrow when we do our show tomorrow at 2 p.m. But I don't get this, man. I don't get those odds. It makes no sense to me. Like, what are they seeing something I don't see? I don't get it. I really don't get it. So
I don't understand that either. And I don't know where. I guess my issue is I don't know where they came up with 8.5. Usually they're really good at kind of nailing down that number to try to get action on both sides or whatever they're trying to do. It's just I don't know, man. The 8.5 just I don't see it. I don't see it.
Yeah, and that's another thing is so if you all remember Sean Davis, who has co-hosted the show a few times before in the past, he is also going to write for Irish Breakdown this year. He had his first feature. It's called Cover 3, and it's during the season. He's going to kind of look at 3 games that's going to happen, and sometimes more, sometimes less, but that's kind of the goal. This week there's only 2 because there aren't a lot of games. We're not giving betting advice on the Fresno San Jose State game or whoever Fresno State's playing. But it's going to basically be, hey, look, here's the games where he's looking at putting money on and his advice and that kind of thing. And then he has one on the season odds, and he tells Notre Dame fans, take the over on Notre Dame's 8.5 wins. And then he goes through like all the teams that are at least favored to win at least like Power Fives win at least 9.5. Like I looked at that and I was like, North Carolina is a full game ahead of Notre Dame. Iowa State is a full game ahead of Notre Dame. They're over unders at 9.5.
I don't get it.
Again, I
don't get it. Hey, look, Tim, I'll tell you what, the betting app that I use, and let me be real clear on this. I don't usually bet more than $5, that kind of thing. In full disclosure, my buddy got me a $50 gift card to one of these betting sites. And so I've been playing with house money, and I've turned that into more than 50. So I play with house money. So I did take the over on 8.5. So, hey, go Irish. Okay.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Yeah. And real quick, so Ben Elijah also followed up with had to get the super chat in early before I run to this meeting. I keep hearing about a 5-star running back that loves Notre Dame. Any word on that? That's what the Justice Haynes comment was in response to. But again, I gotta see it.
Yeah, exactly. John Erickson jumping in. He says, how much of a distraction is it for the coaches to have to continue to recruit 22 guys while the season is underway?
It's not. I mean, that's how it used to be.
It's the part of the day-to-day. Yeah. I mean, you make time for
it. And it's so much easier now than it was 20 years ago because you've got Chad Bowden, you've got Dre Brown, you've got the whole Aaron Kearney, the whole recruiting operation,
And with communication, like, look, you can sit in your office and you're not even having to pick up the phone. You can shoot a text.
It's a mass DM. Yeah. I mean, I give my Twitter account to some recruiting intern who's sending, kid stuff. I mean, every coach does that. I mean, let's be honest.
Right.
I heard that there was a guy at Ohio State that like literally just like kind of had his phone was connected to Urban Meyer's phone. And he would just text kids as Urban Meyer. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's not a knock. That's just.
Look, you gotta you have to get everybody involved, and it's okay to delineate some of those jobs to some other people. I mean, that just is what it is.
Yeah, I agree with Irish Cubby here, Vince. I think something would have to go horribly wrong for this team to not win at least 9 games.
Exactly. I mean, we're talking massive injuries. We're talking. I mean, just or COVID cancels 3 games. I'm just saying.
Right. Now I didn't think about that. That's the interesting thing is what happens if COVID cancels games?
Well, Notre Dame's
get
not
money back. Didn't people get money back last year when games were canceled?
That I don't know. As far as the tickets and stuff. No, you're talking about betting.
Betting. Yeah.
I think they did. Yeah, they did. Because it was like it didn't play. So yeah, they did.
Yeah. And then by the way, Vince, we were about 1.5 minutes late, 2 minutes late. Ben Elijah's response was, I think Vince's class lasted a little too long, or maybe Brian is talking to him about his singing. Ouch. We had the talk. No, we didn't.
Yeah. Well, how about this? Vince sings like the WB Frog.
That's accurate.
That can't be a compliment. I don't even know what that means.
It's accurate.
That can't be good.
He's not wrong.
Yeah.
I just had a childhood flashback when he said the WB Frog.
Super chats might get interesting if Vince sings more. Man.
Yeah. We had this thing growing up, and I don't know if this was like a Northwest Ohio thing. It was called Froggy's Pad. And it was like this child's cartoon thing, but they'd play like I can't remember all the cartoons, but like Transformers and Thundercats were 2 of them that were part of the Froggy's Pad time. And so my mom, being the world's best mom, would get up. I think it started like 4 or 5 in the morning or something like that, and she'd get up in the morning. And remember, this is VHS days, right? I'm old. There was no DVR that you could set days in advance. You had to get up and hit record when it started. She'd hit record for Transformers and Thundercats every morning so that I could then watch it when I got up before school started.
That's nice. I was a big Transformers guy.
That's loving. Oh, yeah.
I
like Transformers more than Thundercats.
I was never He-Man was another guy. One. It was He-Man and Transformers for me. So Thundercats was never really on my radar. So
I watched it. It wasn't, I was more G.I. Joe, Transformers, obviously He-Man. But I like Thundercats. Lion-O was a beast. Get it? Okay. Sorry.
Yeah. Liam Gaming, here we go. What are your biggest worries now that Marist is out?
Pass game D with him out. I think run game wise, Vince, JD Bertrand is going to be. If maybe they might actually be a touch better against the run with JD Bertrand in the game. I think the big difference is going to be in the pass game production, rush and coverage. I think that's going to be the big drop off. And I think JD's a good athlete. I think Shane's a good athlete. I don't think either of them is as fast as Maris. And so I think speed is out. And I did want to say something. I just want people to know I'm still trying to figure out what his status is in regards to how long the injury is going to be out. I mentioned in the article I wrote when we reported the news that he was out that said I had told a source he was going to be out for the year, but I wasn't ready to dive into that because it's still too early. I have still heard season over into November. And then I heard today from a source, I'm still trying to find this one out, that it could just be 4 weeks.
Wow. Big
so
difference.
Again, I am not
all over the map.
All over the map. So give us a little bit to figure that out. And here's why it could change. What you have to understand is about the kind of injury he had is you're going to have an initial diagnosis, but you're not going to really know what's going on until two things happen. One or two things happen. Number one is you got to let the swelling go down. And that usually takes at least 24 hours, Vince, right? For that to fully go down before you can really get in there and inspect things and find out, hey, look, we knew it was broke, but it's not as bad as we thought, or it was a clean break and we can repair, or, hey, it wasn't a break at all. It was just a sprain. And you really don't know that till the swelling goes down. And then number two, you can't do like a lot of the tests and stuff until the swelling goes down. So that's number one. And then number two, if it is something that requires surgery, you may not know the full extent of the injury until you get in there.
Right.
And so, and I don't know if it's going to require surgery. I haven't been told that yet. I'm just telling you like the how these things go. That's why you'll see a guy, get injured for a game. They take the MRI in the stadium and it's like, hey, this he's out for the game. This is bad. And then they'll say, hey, this could be, and then you find out, hey, the guy's out 2 weeks. Why is the difference? Or, hey, it doesn't look like it's that bad. And then 2 weeks, it's actually broken. He's out for 6 months or whatever. It's because you really don't get a great idea. And if there's some doctors and stuff in here, some trainers could tell me this, back me up on this, but you need to let the swelling go down and let some of that go down before you can get a really clear, accurate gauge on that. And so that's why you're seeing this kind of all over. Plus, Notre Dame just hasn't spoken on it yet. And that's when they don't speak on things, and then just rumors just like fly around the place. Like now it's like the cleats, and it was this, and
Well, and it's good and bad that we're not going to hear from Brian Kelly until Monday. But by Monday, we're going to know. We're going to, you know what I mean? We're going to know. He'll know what the prognosis is, and he'll tell you. I mean, they're not going to keep it a secret, and I think we'll know from our sources as well by then as well. But when you don't hear anything out of the Notre Dame camp specifically to the public, that's when the rumors go nutty. And that's what's happening, frankly.
And Vince, I just got an email. I'm allowed to give out the name of the person that gave that big donation. And we've seen him in the chat before. It's just your ordinary Joe. We've seen him in here before. So,
Not so ordinary anymore, buddy.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
No.
Thank you.
So you're saying he was ordinary until he gave us a bunch of money? Is that what you're saying, Vince?
Wow.
Hurtful. I'm on fire today, man. I'm on fire today. You ticked me off before the show. I'm coming at you. Coming at you.
Oh my gosh. All right, Irishman 7114. I'm so pumped. Notre Dame is about to start football. My Memphis Tigers have the #1 basketball class. I need someone to give me some headbutting tips.
That is insane. I mean, first of all, don't do that because you don't want to be concussed during either one of those seasons. But they just got Amani Bates yesterday. I think they already got like Jalen Duran. I think they got too. Like that's an insane class. Like Memphis was always like a team that tried to buy players. Now it's legal, so they're gonna start cleaning up. They're gonna start cleaning. Did I say something wrong?
That's hilarious.
Not correct.
Yes, no, you're not wrong. Now. You're not wrong.
Yeah. So it's a big pickup.
Who's the head coach down there? Isn't
Penny Hardaway?
Penny Hardaway. Yeah. Okay. That's what I thought.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Brian Denbo says been gone for a while. Hospital been catching up on the shows. I have to ask: are the Notre Dame fans who are foaming over Arch Manning the same Notre Dame fans flexing over the Peacock Network? I'm not sure the correlation there, but I mean, it's possible.
Hey, and Brian, I don't know why you're in the hospital, man, but I'm glad you're not there anymore, and I'm glad you're back with us, man. So
no doubt.
And you got your nice little car in there. It looked like at first I thought there might have been like some flooding around it because I know there's been a lot of flooding.
That's true.
Our guy Matt D sent me a picture of his car, and it was like, I mean, like here's the top of the car, and like the water was up to here. Yeah, new car time. So yeah.
Brandon says couldn't let Ben be the only one to send a super chat while we're both at the same place of employment watching this right now instead of working.
Love it. Love it.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yep.
That is great. That is great.
Ooh, I love this next one from Rob.
Yeah, Rob Titoff says, Vince and Brian, in your lifetime, what are the 5 most talented Notre Dame teams? Mine are in the following: 92, 89, 88, 93, 18. Oh, and 18 and 20 are a tie. Ooh. In my lifetime. Well, you can scratch out the early 80s. I think that's fair, right?
I mean, my lifetime of Notre Dame fandom begins in '88. Essentially, is when I can legitimately say that, Vince.
Sure.
You know, honestly, I have. So I don't have 93 on my most talented of all time teams. Yeah,
really?
I think that team had some elite players at the top. I mean, BY's a Hall of Famer, Bryce Young's a Hall of Famer, Aaron Taylor's a Hall of Famer. Jeff Burris was on that team. Really good player. But they had just lost Reggie Brooks, Jerome Bettis, Tom Carter. I mean, Bobby Taylor was on that 93 team too. Derek Mays on that team. So, again, I'm not saying it wasn't very talented. I just feel like some of the teams that came before were actually more talented.
Right.
That team was just more of a great team.
So you're going to say 92 then, because
I would say 92. Again, the question was most talented teams.
True.
Right? I would argue that Brian Kelly's most talented team was not 2018 or 2020. It was 2015.
15. Yeah. I might throw in there either the 05 or the 06 Charlie Weiss teams. Then the problem is there wasn't a ton of talent on defense, but there was a ton of firepower on offense.
Victor Abamiri was a high pick.
Sure.
You had, Tommy Zibikowski was a high pick, although I always felt he's a tad overrated. I know that's blasphemy to some Notre Dame fans, but it is what it is.
He was a great punt returner.
But those teams to me were top heavy. You had Mo Stovall, and I think the 05 team was more talented than the 06 team.
Yeah,
I think Mo Stovall was better than Raymond McKnight. I think Anthony Fasano was better than John Carlson, at least the 06 version of John Carlson. But you look at that 05 team, it was top heavy in my opinion. Ryan Harris was on that team, but there were also some guys starting on that team that would not play for Notre Dame right now, if we're being honest about it. And so that to me, that's the other factor for me. I look at that 2015 team, and I'm like, you had Will Fuller, you had Deshaun Kaiser, you had CJ Prosise, Josh Adams, you had 3 first-round draft picks on the offensive line, and a second-round draft pick, and another guy in Steve Elmer that would have been drafted had he stuck with football.
And he would have been drafted high, too.
Defensively, you have all 4 defensive linemen are NFL players. All 4 of them are in the NFL. And the funny thing is, the one guy of that group of 4, because it was Rochelle, it was Jerry Tillery, Sheldon Day, and Romeo Okwara. The guy who went undrafted from that group is the best NFL player of that group, Romeo Okwara.
Yeah.
You had Jalen Smith, one of the best linebackers in Notre Dame history. You had Kavari Russell was a 3rd-round pick. Cole Luke. Had Brian Van Gorder not been hired, Cole Luke, I think, would have been drafted. You had Max Redfield at safety. You had Elijah Shoemate. I mean, that team was loaded talent-wise. Coaching was and look, I know coaches that coached on the 2017 and 2018 team that told me if the coaching staff from 2017 was on the it was coaching 2015, they're like, we don't want a title. The point being, they thought that the 2015 team was more talented,
right?
And so to me, that was Kelly's most talented team. I think 2018 is next. I don't think 2020 was in the top 2 for most talented. And 2012 is an interesting one because that was the most top-heavy talented team of Brian Kelly's tenure, in my opinion. 2012, when you look at Eifert and Manti and Nix and Tuitt, I mean, they haven't had a defensive end as good as Stephon Tuitt since then.
Yeah, you're right.
They haven't had a nose guard as good as Stephon Tuitt since then. They haven't had a linebacker that was more productive than Manti since then. You could argue Zach Martin was their best left tackle that they've had. I mean, he was that good. Tyler Eifert, best tight end they've had. It was just after the first 6 or 7, there's a bigger drop off. So, my list, Vince, is 89, 90, and 92 of the Holtz era, and then 2015 and 2018 are my 5. That's my 5.
No, I like that. I would take out the 18. I put 05 just because I enjoyed watching that team a lot.
You're a Brady fan.
I'm a Brady fan, and I'm a Samardzija fan, and I love watching that team. And
let me ask you this question.
Ahead.
Question. And you can think about it as we move on to other questions if you want.
Okay, fair enough.
If you had Brady Quinn on the 2018 team, who would have been better, the 2018 team or the 05 team?
The 2018 team.
Okay, so then was it really that much more talented, or was it just more talented at one position?
Yeah, I don't even have to think about it. It's because they had a stud quarterback.
There you go.
And so he made everybody else better.
2005 and 6 was clearly better quarterback, but top to bottom, right? The difference was quarterback. Top to bottom, the 2018 team had the better roster.
Well, that's what we've been talking about all along. Is that Notre Dame is a true stud quarterback away? You're going to
change your opinion now. You're going to change your.
You're making me change.
I'm not making you do anything. I know
you're not. Look, no, you're not making.
The biggest complaint that I get about our show is we don't disagree enough.
I know.
And then when I try to get you to debate with me, you're like, okay, I give in. It's 2018.
Well, I'm sticking with
your
05
point.
because
okay.
I'm sticking with 05.
Tell me why it was a more talented team.
I think that they
Besides
were
quarterback.
Well, because I think the quarterback made those receivers better. I think they made them more explosive. I think they made the offense more explosive. So I realize that all boils back down to the quarterback.
But that's a pretty important thing.
But yeah, it's a really important thing. So I'm sticking with 05. Dang it.
Yeah.
All right. Michael Morris says,
I'm like trying to get Vince to engage and like push back, Vince. Come on, you can do it.
Last year, we were very good at running out the clock at the end of games. Do you think we are still going to be good at this?
I don't care. I don't want to be good at that. I want to be good at beating teams
scoring
by 40
points. Yeah, I want to be good at scoring points.
No, but in all seriousness, Michael, look, Notre Dame's always got the ability to get back to being that team when they need to be, because of the style of offense they play and because of the type of running backs and tight ends they have. And again, as we've pointed out, this offensive line, I don't know if it's going to be good enough to like be a championship unit, but it's not going to suck, right? That at least I don't think it will. There's too much experience and talent for this offensive line to be bad. I think it's at least going to be better than what it was in 2019.
Right.
Potentially could be better than what it was in 2018 before Alex Bars went down. So, I don't think it's going to be bad. I think it's just our concern is relative to what Notre Dame has been on the offensive line at times in the past and what it was last year. But if Notre Dame still doesn't have a top 10 offensive line, then Jeff Quinn did a bad job.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Yes. It's just not going to be top 3 like it was last year.
Notre Dame should be top 10 all the time. I mean, that's the way they should be recruiting. Yes.
Like 2018 was excusable because you lost Q, you lost McGlinchey, and Alex Bars got hurt in the middle of the season, right?
Sure.
So, I mean, I get it, right? But yes, when you're recruiting the way you're supposed to recruit at Notre Dame, there's never an excuse not to be at least top 10 or 12 ever in the offensive line. Heck, 2016 was probably the worst year in the last 6-7 years at offensive line. They still had 2 All-Americans on that list.
Right.
And they still had an offensive line that was good enough, had everyone else not stunk, that offense would have been pretty good. So, yeah.
Agreed. Okay. Brandon says, I'm extending my lunch break a tad. It's free for all Friday for damn sake. I love that. I love that. I had to read it just how he typed it too. Mm-hmm. So Tony Stengel, this is a really good question. He says, do you believe Notre Dame has recruited to a level where they can sustain injuries to key players? We all saw what happened when Love went down against Clemson. Are we past that now?
Sustain in regards to can they lose key players and still play at the same level? No one is. And the point being is look at Clemson when they lost Trevor Lawrence. They went 1-1 and had to come back against BC at home to win that one, right? I mean, BC outplayed them without Trevor. Okay, they were not the same team, and they had a 5-star quarterback to replace him with.
Yeah.
Alabama loses Tua Tagovailoa in 2019. They replace him with a guy that will eventually be a first-round pick and eventually lead them to a national title. But at that time, when they lost him in that season, they went and lost to Auburn a couple weeks later because he threw a couple picks. Nobody does that, right? So are they past that? To a degree, no, because no one is. No one's just going to lose a guy and lose multiple guys and be as good as they were. It's are they good enough to be able to lose guys and still win? And yeah, I think that they are.
I think they are too.
And look, everybody talks about what happened against, with Julian Love against Clemson, and yeah, that's true. But if Alabama would have lost Patrick Surtain in the college football playoff this year, it would have changed how that game went, because they couldn't just put him on Javon McKinley and say, go cover that guy.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's true for everybody. If Clemson would have lost Trevor Lawrence in 2018, that was, like Notre Dame lost an All-American. I mean, that game turns out differently. So, I think most teams aren't past that. What I will say, however, to your point, Tony, and I'm kind of dodging your point, but now I'm going to get back to it, is I just want to make the point that nobody is just as good as they would have been without him, right?
Right.
Unless some players, occasionally some guys said, like, wow, I didn't know that guy was that good. But most guys, when they lose, and the reason I'm pointing to Love is because Love's situation is a little different than Maris Luafau, right? Number one, that was right in the middle of a game.
Right.
All right.
You had the biggest game of the year.
Right.
Too,
whereas Maris is hurt. There's still 2 weeks left to get your guy to replace him. You should be able to overcome a guy getting hurt in the second week of camp, or 2 weeks before the season starts. You should be able to sustain it. And I think they are in position to do that. And I explained, there's an article on Irish Breakdown I would encourage you all to go read. It's called What's Next. It's kind of like a look of all, I talk about the two Wills. I talk about Prince Collie. I talk about the two Mike situation, Vince, that you have talked about. And I talked about how the Viper position is going to help ease this loss as well. So I'd encourage you to go read that. But, so that there's different types of injuries. In losing a guy in the middle of a game or during game week, like when they lost Austin Consworth, like the Thursday before the first game, that's a lot harder to overcome than losing Maris Luafau. Or when they lost Jerron Jones, remember, in fall camp in 2015, or when they lost Sean Crawford in the first 2 weeks of fall camp. Those are a little harder, a little easier to overcome than losing a guy in the middle of the game.
You've got time. I mean, you've got time to get it right. Yeah.
Right.
82 Slice says, are there any silent commits still sitting out there of which you are aware?
Not officially that I'm aware. I believe there's a 2023 kid that might be waiting to go public, but I don't know that for a fact. And it's not a hard one to figure out. I'm not revealing any secrets. It's not a big name. It's not a top 100 guy, in case anybody's wondering. But 2022 there aren't any silent commits that I'm aware of.
I'm going to throw this up here. Dane Draper said wants a score prediction for the opener. We'll do that, just not yet. Right? I mean, we always have our score predictions and stuff, and we post them on Fridays, right? Is that
Thursdays?
Thursdays, okay.
Because we're gonna do the Thursday is gonna be our pregame, our game. So
that's right.
Today, this is a good time to kind of bring up what our in-season content plan is going to be.
Good call.
So it's going to be a little different week one because the game's on a Sunday, and it's a road game, which means I'll be traveling on Monday. Monday is going to be at 12:30. We're going to meet. We'll discuss anything that Brian Kelly just talked about. If there's anything left over from the game, right? So we're going to kind of begin with Monday. We'll talk about that. And then we'll do sort of what happened in the college football world. So address what BK said in the press conference, because the press conference is at noon. It usually is going to be over by the time we start our show. 12:30 is going to be our start times. And then Tuesday and Wednesday, we're going to do sort of taking an in-depth look at Notre Dame offense against the opposing defense, and then on Wednesday, the Notre Dame defense against the opposing offense.
Looking forward.
We're going to look at the matchup upcoming. So we'll look at like on Tuesday this week for Florida State. Like the post game of Florida State is going to be different. The pregame of Florida State is going to be the normal. But Tuesday will be kind of us doing just a deep dive into the Notre Dame offense against the Florida State defense. We're going to look at stats. We're going to compare the Notre Dame scoring offense against the Florida State scoring defense, the rush offense against the rush defense, the pass defense offense against the pass defense, personnel matchup, stuff like that. Wednesday will be the opposite sides of the ball, right? Thursday is going to be our bigger picture look and our game prediction, right? So it'll be sort of our actual game prediction show. And then Friday is going to be our Friday free-for-all. And then Saturday we'll have a post-game show, and it'll be after the show, probably about a half hour to an hour after the show. And we'll just kind of give our immediate reaction to the game. And then we'll let you give your immediate reaction to the game. And then Sunday evenings, I'm not sure if we decided to go 7 or 8 is what we're looking at right now, most likely. So kind of after the afternoon football games are over, we're going to have a Sunday night show that's going to be called Upon Further Review. And so since Vince and I are coaches, we know this. So after every game, you have an immediate reaction as a coach to a game. And, I don't think this guy did this, or I called a bad game, or we did this. And then you watch the film and you're like, you know what? That kid played better than I thought he did. I made some bad calls, or man, that call was there. We didn't execute it. There's all types of things you see upon further review. And so then we'll kind of have more of an analytical, hey, here's the recap of the game. Here's some things. Here's some things that went right. Here's some things that went wrong. And then we're also going to have a video feature that's going to not be available on YouTube. It's going to be something we record, make unlisted, and it's only available to members of the message board.
Yeah, on the board.
But we're going to have a live show that you all can see every Sunday. Now, another thing we're going to do this year, and it's not going to be live, at least that's the plan as of right now, is we're also going to record sort of like about a 10 to 15 minute shows kind of previewing the big games of the weekend. So Ohio State, Oregon in week 2, you better believe we're going to have a show on that, right? Georgia, Clemson of week 1, you better believe we're going to have a show about that. And so that'll be fun too. So we're going to try to expand a little bit and just talk college football. Those will be recorded and then put up in the morning, kind of like Thursday and Friday.
Yeah.
So we'll have some of that stuff too. So that is going to be lots of YouTube stuff. And the other part of that too is so we're going to do our season prediction of who we think they're going to win and lose to on tomorrow at 2 p.m. But we're not going to actually give a score prediction for Florida State until Thursday. Right. It'll be sort of at the end of our Thursday shows every week. We'll give our score prediction, and then that'll just be me and Vince. And then on Friday morning, we'll have the bigger staff game prediction. We'll still have our scores.
The written versions.
Right. Yeah. But then we'll have the written version, and then we'll have all of our staff on there, which will be fun. And then, of course, as you all know, like last year, we'll do game predictions for like 2 or 3 of the biggest games of the upcoming weekend. And so like that's why today we did Illinois, Nebraska, and Hawaii, UCLA. Next week we'll have like Clemson, Georgia. We'll have there's a couple of there's actually we're gonna have to make some tough week 1 decisions because that's how loaded week 1 is. But there's gonna be a lot of stuff. Yep. So we're very excited about that and really ready to rock and roll with that. So let's get going, Vince, because I know you're gonna have to leave here soon. Or are you done?
Yeah, we're about there. So okay. I am at 2:42 or 12:42. Excuse me.
Okay.
You can see.
Yeah, I'm where you are. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. All right, everybody. I will see you guys tomorrow, 2:00. Be there or be square.
That's not a square. That's a rectangle.
You know what?
That's why you teach gym
You're
class.
all over me, man.
All right. Let's get back to some questions here. Tommy Guns, what is the most kids Notre Dame has recruited in 1 year from the same school? I'm not sure the answer to that, but I'd be willing to bet you a lot of money. It happened during the Jerry Faust era when he was recruiting like kids from Moeller and like certain schools in Ohio, like a ton of kids per year. I could be wrong on that. This is one of those days, another one of the many days where I wish we had Lou Emoji around because he can answer that in probably 10 seconds. He'd have to think about it for like 2 seconds and then it'd take him 8 seconds to answer it. So that would have been definitely a Lou Emoji question. Domer Grizz, happy Friday. You guys have inspired me to become a football coach. I got guilted into coaching my son's 3rd, 4th grade recreational flag football team. Any tips or advice? I can't give you any tips or advice just beyond at that age. Yes, winning and losing is always something you want to strive on, but it's about teaching kids how to play the game. It's not about being in their face. It's not about making them mentally tougher. It's about teaching them how to play the game. And I think one of the big mistakes that coaches at that level make, and I'd even say up all the way to high school, is they try to make it about you. And it's not about you. It's about those kids. It's about instilling in them understanding that football is a great game, but also a game that requires great technique, great fundamentals, and it's a game that has to be played in a safe manner. And proper tackling form, it being taught that at an early age is so important. Footwork is important. Those things are all important, but it's also about instilling a love for the game. And that doesn't mean you can't be demanding of them, because I think you need to be demanding of them. And it doesn't mean that you can't work them, because you need to work them. Football is a hard sport, but it's not one of those things where I haven't been to many games of that age. My parents didn't let me play football that age. I didn't start playing football until really the 7th and 8th grade. But I've been to so many games where I'll see a coach like grab a kid at that age. If you're grabbing a kid by the face mask, unless that kid says something about your mama, that's just not how you should be. That doesn't mean you can't be intense. Doesn't mean you can't be loud but make it a positive experience for them and teach them how to play the game. That's the most. Yes, I'm not one of those people that ever says don't keep score. Oh, keep score, right? Because how you play has consequences towards winning and losing. But don't make it about that. If you go through the season and you guys have a 500 record or sub 500 record, but your team loved playing football and those kids were taught how to play the game, fundamentally how to play the game, you did more for them than if you could have just done something that maybe skirted it a little bit and you went 6-0 or 7-0 or whatever the case may be. Teach them how to play the game, and you can be demanding while also making it something where they look forward to being at practice every day. And if you're teaching them, even at that age, if you're teaching kids and you're supporting kids, they're going to be they want to be coached hard. I believe that if they love the game, but hard doesn't mean mean or losing sight of what it should be all about. That's the only advice I can give you. And Vince would be better to ask that. So, yeah. All right, so we've got a question here from John Erickson. Brian, is the Luafau injury in any way related to the shoe brand issue? I believe I've heard you talk about. I don't know if I've ever talked about that. I haven't heard anything that had anything to do with the shoe. My understanding is that there was a collision that led to it, not just a plant. But again, I don't have full details on that. Domer Gris says, how often will the Viper drop into coverage? I know that really limited Julian Aguar's pass rush opportunities. Not really. Again, any good coach it's going to depend on the kid. Julian Aguara didn't actually drop into coverage a whole lot during his tenure at Notre Dame. They didn't ask him to do that a ton, to be honest with you. They asked Dalen Hayes to do that a lot more than they asked Julian Aguara to do that. And I'm going to try to pull up the numbers here on that. But yeah, Notre Dame definitely did not ask him to do a whole lot of dropping into coverage. And I'm going to pull that up. So like in 2018, that was when Julian had his big year. So in 2018, for example, Julian Aguara dropped into coverage 40 times and pass rushed 314 times. Dalen Hayes dropped into coverage 52 times and pass rushed 253 times. So he clearly was used a lot more of that. And then if you look at 2020, Dalen Hayes dropped into coverage 47 times, only pass rushed 233 times. So clearly a lot more dropping into coverage with Dalen Hayes than they did with Julian Aguara. So I don't really view that as something he did a lot of. And I mean, 40 times in one season, that's you played 13 games. It's basically 3 a game. That's not a lot. How often will this? I think it depends on the player. I think they'll ask some players to do more than others, I believe, but I don't think they're going to have them do a ton of it. At least all of them. But I think we'll see it. Look, but I think the difference this time is when they're going to be in coverage, it's going to be more often they're going to actually be off the ball playing in more of a 3-3. And the counter to that, yeah, they're going to do coverage a little bit more, but the counter is they're going to be allowed to pass rush from all over the field a little bit more. And it's going to provide them with a little bit more versatility in how they attack people, I believe. Michael Morris asks, if we lose another linebacker, do you think coach will need to look at different position to replenish the position? And if so, who? Well, I think it's been mentioned. I think it was talked about on our message board. People were talking about, Jordan Patelho, and that's a good one. I think Jordan Patelho could play that position. I think you would look at the rover position, but honestly, you potentially move Jack Kaiser inside, which I wouldn't do. I'd move Prince Collie inside. Maybe Isaiah Pryor, Paul Malala. I mean, you could maybe look at some of those options, but honestly, I think Patelho would probably be the most obvious. Patelho and Prince Collie, to me, would be the top 2 guys that I would look at moving inside. Those would be the only ones I'd really look at, in my opinion. It's a good question. Liam Gaming. In practice, was Shane Simon better playing the same as last year, or did the other 2 simply pass him because they are better? So this is something that I'm answering for Vince, because Vince and I have talked about this. This is what Vince saw. I just want to make sure, because I haven't been to practices. This is something that Vince and I talked about this, because I asked him this very same question, Liam. So this is a great question, Chris. So what he said to me is Shane looked better, but still kind of the same, meaning he was still having the same issues that he had before, was still too blockable, was still not aggressive enough, but was still better than he was. So, he didn't make the big jump that we'd hoped. I think he was better in the spring than he was in fall camp. But the other part of that is the other guys just got a lot better. Maris got a lot better. JD got a lot better. Because if Shane was playing the same way he was last year and everybody else was playing the same way they were last year, he'd still probably be the first team. But I think those guys have outplayed him. I don't think Shane regressed. I think Shane is better, just not better enough to obviously continue to seize hold of that starting job. Matt Romero says, Notre Dame posted a video of Cone. It was to Keys, broken up by Kyle Hamilton. I watched the video about 100 times. Perfectly thrown ball. That's a TD. If a first-team All-American isn't covering it, great D on, great O. Love it. Yeah, and not just an All-American, but a 6'4" All-American was required to break that up. And that's the kind of play you love to see because it was a great route, great ball. Everything was perfect, but just Kyle Hamilton's just that good that he can make those plays. No question. Alan English says, I plan to go watch Avery Johnson play on October 1st. Anything useful I can watch for that you're curious about? Yeah. So one of the things, Alan, that I saw on film of Avery when he was a sophomore was he got a little bit loose with his footwork and his throwing mechanics because he does so much off platform. I would be curious to see kind of how he improves as a passer. So like if I was a coach still, I'd probably get there about an hour and a half before the game. And I'd watch him a ton during warm-ups because that's when you're going to see him just kind of dropping back, getting in motion, throwing the ball, see the release, see how clean it is. Is it forced? Does he spin it good? How does it come out of his hand? Stuff like that. I want to see his foot quickness in the pocket, his footwork in the pocket, going through drills and stuff. Because sometimes you can't really show that in games because your offensive line maybe doesn't give you a chance or maybe your offense doesn't give you a chance. And so, like, for example, I recruited a receiver to Christopher Newport, and when I went and saw him play, he caught one pass for like 11 yards. It was a crossing route because he played in a run-dominant offense. But I went to the game beforehand, like an hour and a half beforehand, watched him go through warm-up, saw the speed, saw him catch the ball over the shoulder, saw him catch the ball away from his body. Saw him catch 15, 20 balls in pregame, saw him running routes in pregame. And so I got to see the athleticism. Then I saw him blocking during the game, stuff like that. But you see some of those things that you may not see in the game because of the type of offense they play. And we recruited the kid, didn't catch many balls in high school, but by his sophomore year, he had set a school record in catches and yards because you have to look for the skills, and then it's your job as a coach to develop those skills. And so that's what I would do if it were up to me. But and those are the things that I'm curious about. So thank you for asking. Tommy Gunn says, happy birthday, Matt. Talking about Matt Romero because it is Matt Romero's birthday. So let's go up here. So happy birthday, D-Rock, also with the happy birthday wishes to Matt Romero. Joseph Salvatore, happy Friday, guys. Wanted to get your thoughts on Jack Cohn working with Phil Simms this summer. Does that make you guys feel good about Jack? I don't know anything about Phil Simms' ability to coach quarterbacks. I don't. So I can't really comment on that. But anytime a guy's putting in work, I like it as long as you're working with someone who's going to be sound. I would assume, knowing the kind of quarterback Phil Simms was, that he knows what he's talking about, and he's not going to be teaching a bunch of dumb stuff, useless stuff. He's going to be actually coaching real football. So I would assume it would be a good thing, but I love the fact that he's putting in work. Jeff Fluke says, you talked about the biggest recruiting misses in the Bika era. Where would you rank missing on Ronald Darby? Top 5. And the reason I'd put it top 5 for sure is not only did they miss him, but he was a commit for a long time. And they lost him late, which was rough. Very, very rough. Jonathan Kazmarek says, Vince, who's your NFL team? And Brian, how did you become a Broncos fan? So Vince's favorite team is the Bears. He's a Chicago fan for pro sports. He's a Bulls fan, he's a Bears fan, and he's a Cubs fan, which a lot of people in northwest Indiana are. I became a Bronco fan, so I don't really remember the story. This is relaying what my dad has told me. So my parents, my whole family on my dad's side are Redskins fans. And then my family on my mom's side is more college football fans, but the people that are NFL fans, they're Browns fans. And so that was but my mom was a Redskins fan because my dad was. So growing up, as a little kid, obviously it would have made sense to be a Redskins fan. I have pictures of me when I was a really little kid wearing Redskins stuff because my dad was from Norfolk, Virginia, and you were a fan of the Redskins. So My dad says that when I was like, I don't know, like 5 or 6 or 6 or 7, somewhere around there, apparently he had a Sports Illustrated. Like, so apparently leading up to the draft, I'd read something about John Elway, but then apparently like his first year or two of the Broncos, he was on a Sports Illustrated cover or inside of Sports Illustrated or something like that. And my dad was subscribed to Sports Illustrated when I was a kid. And apparently I saw a picture of John Elway and I was like, that's my guy. And I became a Broncos fan just because of John Elway. And then, of course, as I got older, I remember being a Bronco fan, and it was because of John Elway. But that's how he said it started. It was me seeing a picture of John Elway in like a Sports Illustrated, or maybe it was a Sporting News. I think he said Sports Illustrated, and I just fell in love with the guy. And, wore number 7 in college and all that kind of stuff. That's one of the reasons I wanted to play quarterback. Yeah, so it's just John Elway, really. And honestly, since he's retired, I've been a Broncos fan, but not the same as I was when he played. I've stayed a Broncos fan, but I would say that I'm curious as to, I think part of that is because he's still with the team, to be honest with you. So, and one of the, I don't like do the whole fanboy thing. Like, I don't ask for autographs. I don't post for pictures, but I'll be honest with you, the closest I ever came to doing that was a couple years ago when I was at the NFL scouting combine and John Elway was speaking, and she took a picture of me with him in the background to send to my mom and dad so they knew that that's what I was doing. But that was the closest I ever became to sort of having that fanboy moment was with John Elway. So that's how I became a Broncos fan. Domer Grizz asked, do you aspire to bring on recruits or commits as guests on the show? I know other podcasts on the beat have done audio interviews with Tyree Shipley when they were recruits. First of all, I'm not trying to be like anybody else on the beat, so I don't really care what they do. Will we get to that when we have when our recruiting operation grows? Sure, I would love to do that. It's just not something that So, to be honest with you, that stuff doesn't really move the needle. Surprisingly, recruiting news does, but just we're interviewing players. We've had interviews with players in the past, and it just doesn't. It doesn't. Other places I've worked, and it just doesn't move the needle a ton. But I'd like to. It won't be live because I don't want to put young people who aren't experienced at doing interviews in a live situation. It would be recorded. Then that way we can clean it up and those type of things, and then we would play it during a live show. We'll eventually get to that. But it's not going to be a big part of what we do. And as I said, it'll be because I just want to give good content. I don't really care about what other people do. Our show is going to be always based on more about bringing you analysis and things like that. And just interviewing a high school recruit is nice, but it's not who we are. We want to be different than what everybody else does. Frank Sarah asked, Coach, do you feel that Notre Dame can run the ball against Florida State? I do. Matt Romero asks, are recruits recruiting other players more now than in the past, or is it just more apparent with social media, et cetera, or is it something I'm just not used to seeing as a product of Notre Dame's success? It's always been the case. I think social media makes it more visible for us all to see, but it's always been there. Michael Johnson, Brian and Vince, in your memory, who was the best safety combo in current Notre Dame history? Boy, that's a good one. Oh, man. I think the Harrison Smith, Jamore Slaughter one in 2011 was really good. I think the two best of the Brian Kelly era, in my opinion, are Harrison Smith and Jamore Slaughter from 2010 and 2011, or more so, 2010 and 2011. And then I'd had to go Jalen Elliott and Alohi Gilman in 2018. I think are the two best that I have seen for Notre Dame. I know there were some really good safety duos in the 90s, though. And Jeff Burris was a part of one. I can't remember who the other safety was on that team. But, yeah. You know what? I'll say the one that I probably think is the best duo, I'd probably say the 02 Jerome Sapp, Glenn Earl tandem. To me, probably that, and then the Harrison Smith, Jamore Slaughter one. I think those two probably, just off the top of my head, Michael, would be the two best. That 2002 Jerome Sapp, Glenn Earl duo was nasty. They were really good. I enjoyed watching those guys play. No question about it. Tommy, I don't know what you want me to say, man. You answer the question. If you know the answer, then say the question. I don't know what you want me to say. I don't have an answer for that. I don't know what you want. I don't know what you want me to say on that, man. I apologize, but I don't know what you want me to say. And sometimes it looks like it's a question that you're asking the chat, not so much us. Dan McDonald, happy Friday. Who do you guys think can be Notre Dame's next consistent deep threat at receiver? I think hopefully it's Braden Lindsey, but I think they've got a few guys can be deep threats. I think Kevin Austin can be a deep threat. I think Braden Lindsey. And then after that, I think their hope is that it's going to be Lorenzo Styles. Jeff Opel, another one of my former players, says Coach D, sorry to hear the Duke. That is Mike Donnelly, who's our head coach at Muhlenberg. Caught on to you checking Indy scores on the sideline. Want to let you know it was worth it. We needed to know. Love the pod. Go Irish. So thank you, Jeff. I appreciate that. Jeff and his brother Tim were both on that team, and I don't remember if anybody was asking me to score, but it was the game I got in trouble for was the 0-2 game. When Notre Dame went down to Florida State to play Florida State. That was the weekend that I was checking scores, and I got in a little bit of trouble with our head coach. His nickname they called him the Duke. His name was Mike Donnelly. Great coach, great guy. I learned probably more from him in the year I spent there than I've ever learned from just one individual in my life. He was outstanding. Brandon says, what site did you bet the 8.5 wins on? I'll take that action. So, Tim Sully, if you could put that on there. I know MGM Sportsbook has 8.5. That was in the article, the Cover 3 article that Sean Davis did today on our site. He had 8.5, and it was MGM Sportsbook was the site that he went to. So I know for a fact that one was there. Brandon says, Vince bets for entertainment purposes only. I'm not sure. Dog DE 98. Folks really think we will lose to Wisconsin and North Carolina 3 to 4 games total. Pathetic. I agree with you. Dog DE. Dog D. If you could help me kind of let me know how you want that pronounced, but I agree with you. I don't get it. I don't see it. I don't, especially losing to both of them. But like, what did I had a buddy, and look, there's Notre Dame fans that believes a good friend of mine who I've known for almost 15 years, like knows football. But he's called me the other day, and he's like, he's panicking about this Wisconsin game because he's hearing other people say it. And I'm like, what? He's like, well, they're just such a consistent program. And I was like, buddy, in 2 of the last 3 years, they've gone 4-3 and 8-5. The 1 year they were 10-2 in the regular season, that quarterback's now at Notre Dame. Like, where do you get this mantra that, oh, they're this really good, consistent program? In the last 3 years, Wisconsin has lost, despite playing just a 7-game season last year, Wisconsin's lost 12 games. 12 games. They are 22-12 the last 3 years. 22-12. And Notre Dame is 33-5. And yet Wisconsin's the more consistent, steady program. Your guess is as good as mine. And I definitely don't get the North Carolina love. I mean, North Carolina went 8-4 last year. Notre Dame beat them at their place by 2 touchdowns, and they lost to 2,000-yard running backs, 1,000-yard receiver, their best defensive player, and all of a sudden they're going to be a lot better this year. Based on what? Based on what? I don't get it. Jonathan Kazmarek says Northwest Ohio. That's my neck of the woods, Brian. Yeah, I was born in Lima, Ohio, and lived there until I was about 15. I still have family there. Those couple times recently when I haven't been on the show because I was driving to Ohio to pick up my grandma, I was driving to Lima to pick her up. So still have a lot of family there. Still go there as often as I can to see her, see my family. My mom's almost entire family lives either there or like in Bluffton, kind of in that region. So, yep. Larry Friedel is another 419 grown up. So another guy from my area. And so I've kind of made this, I've said this before, but yeah, that's why the best the best high school football player I saw until I moved to Virginia was Mike Elston. He played at St. Mary's Memorial. They were in the Western Buckeye League. I went to Bath, which is in Lima. They were in the Western Buckeye League. So, yeah, he was a heck of a – and y'all see how big Mike Elston is, right? He was a running back in high school. It was really good. Let's get some more questions here. Tommy Guns trying to make me feel old, says Brian, my life began in 1988. Okay, so you're young. Good for you. I'm old. But that means you also missed out on the last great era of Notre Dame football. So hopefully we can get there. P-Dub with an interesting college football question. If Scott Frost gets fired, is the Nebraska job attractive? I don't think it's an overly attractive job, to be honest with you. I think going to the Big Ten was the worst move for them. Honestly, if they could get out of the Big Ten, I would love to see Nebraska go back to the Big 12. I think that would make that job attractive again. But right now, being a Big Ten West program that hasn't had any relevant success since 97, early 2000s. No, it's not and it's in Nebraska. No, I don't think it's a super attractive job right now. Chris ND 4L Fortson. Chris Fortson, is there any news on Tosh Baker? I haven't heard much about him during fall camp. Thank you. I think he's coming along, Chris. I mean, he's developing. He's getting there. He's going to need some time. I think his big thing is developing strength and his technique, and that's my one concern from him is he needs a lot of technique work, and I don't know if that's necessarily been a strength of Coach Quinn the last couple of years. And so that's a little bit of a red flag for me, but I didn't expect him to be a guy that was competing for a starting job as a redshirt freshman, or at least, not going to beat out a guy like Blake Fisher at least, but I still have a high hopes for him. And I have not heard anyone say that, boy, he's not as good as we thought. It's just he's going to need time. That's the big thing. He's just going to need time. Bob Sacamano, picks are in, and I got the win week 1 with the next closest -5. Just saying, no need to let it play out. And I think that Bob is referring to our Pick'em League that we're in. And while I'm down there seeing Bob's thing, apparently there are hot girls that want to jump into our chat to get people to their video chat, and we're going to get rid of that because there's no need for that nonsense here. I don't know why that person keeps coming in. All right, let's get back up here to some more questions. But I did like that Nebraska question, P-Dub. And look, I'd be curious to hear other people's opinions on this. I don't think Nebraska is an attractive job anymore. I think they're going to have someone win there to make it attractive. Because other than that, I just don't see what they really bring to the table. And I really don't. Irish Cubby, I was a baby in 1988. Again, all you young people. I would love to be able to reminisce on a national title season, maybe soon. My dad did break the remote throwing it at the TV after the BC game in 1993. I think there was a lot of that in Notre Dame Nation that day. No question about it. No question about it. And by the way, Bob Sakamono, thank you for the super chat as well, by the way. I read your question, but completely forgot to thank you for the super chat, and I do apologize, but it is very much appreciated. Very much. Rage Quits is Jeff Samardzija, the Shark, my all-time favorite offensive Notre Dame player ever. You're not alone. Michael Johnson says the 2012 team was a great team, but no backups to replace them. Yes, they didn't have the depth. They were really top-heavy. That 2012 team was really top-heavy. Tommy Gunn says huge Brady Quinn fan here. Chief Brody says if Jimmy Clausen or Brady Quinn was on the 2017 to 2020 team, they would have won a title. I believe that. If they would have had Jimmy or Brady, Notre Dame would have won a title in the last 4 years. I believe the 2018 team would have been it, or 2017. I think the 17 and 18 teams, to me, were the two most talented of the recent era. And especially when you look at like the lines, yeah, you put one of those two guys on those teams, yeah, I agree with you. I think they would have won a title. I really do. I think quarterback's been the biggest thing holding Notre Dame back. I really do. I really do. Emerald Isle says I'd take Quinn over Limousine Clausen. The guy was a head case. I don't think he was a head case. I think Jimmy was he doesn't have much of a personality. He's not much of a leader, but I don't think he was a head case. But look, here's the deal. There's been head cases win national championships. Jimmy was a very gifted quarterback. Yes, I think his issues were more family related. I think that family kind of created that monster, but he still's heck of a quarterback, an absolutely heck of a quarterback, no question. Matt Romero, you think Clawson would have made any NIL money when he had his shiner? He would have made a lot of money, NIL money back then, no question. Dante Moore playing in Carmel tonight. Okay, I'm gonna have to look. I'll have to look into that. See if that's on TV. I did not know that. John Lynch says, "Was anybody close to beating Madden out? I thought they were been more of a battle. Not that I've been told. I've been told it's been pretty much Madden's deal from jump. To be honest with you." Mark Stewart, my man Mark Stewart, do you think Penn State works in Big Ten or is it Nebraska type of thing in your opinion? I think the Big Ten works for Penn State, Mark, but I don't think it's the ideal scenario for Penn State. I still think the problem with Penn State in the Big Ten is they're always going to be overshadowed by Ohio State. And I'm not talking about just being a better team or not. I think that Ohio State is always going to be the team in the East. And I kind of feel like if we were to see some this is a really good question, because the difference, Mark, is before the Big Ten's the only conference Penn State's ever been in, right? Whereas with Nebraska, here's the difference between the two, Mark. It's a really good question. It's making me go back and forth on my answers. I'm all over the place, Mark. So first of all, let's look at it this way. Here's what makes them different, first and foremost. Number one is moving to the Big Ten made recruiting at Nebraska harder, because to me, it took away a lot of the places that allowed Nebraska to recruit well, which is the Southwest, Texas, Oklahoma, that area, and then some out in California. They thought they were going to tap into like the East Coast by moving to the Big Ten, and that was what they said. It was always about money, but they said that, and they're not going to go into Ohio and beat Ohio State for kids, or Notre Dame for kids, or Penn State for kids, or Michigan for kids, right? Just rarely. And then not being in the Big 12. I mean, what kids grow? Oh, I'm in Texas. I can't wait to play in the Big Ten. No, you may go to Ohio State because you want to play for a championship. Not many Texas kids grow up saying, "Oh, I can't wait to play in the Big Ten," but they did want to play in the Big 12. And going to Nebraska gave you a chance to still play in front. I mean, because if you go to Big Nebraska, you're never coming back to your home state to play a game, most likely. Whereas playing at Nebraska when you were in the Big 12, you got to play, or the Big 8, or you still got to play in Texas, or you got to play in your region. You got to play Oklahoma, you got to play Oklahoma State, and those type of teams. And so that hurt their recruiting base. Penn State going to the Big Ten didn't hurt their recruiting base. It didn't affect them the way that it affected Nebraska. So going to the Big Ten actually in some ways helped Penn State. I think overall where it hurt Penn State is they were never going to be the unique program that I think they could have been in the Big East. I think Penn State should have gone to the Big East. Again, if this is taking money out of the equation, because again, it was always about money. But Mark, if you took it out, Penn State should have been a Big East program. They were a Pennsylvania East program, right? Now they'd get kids from Ohio and all that, but like Jersey was great for them, and Virginia's been a great state for them, and of course their in-state, success, Northeast, New York, guys like that. So to me, I felt like the Big Ten helped them, but it wasn't the best option. I think going to the Big East would have been the best option for them, and I think they could have maybe helped save the Big East in some ways. And that's why I've said if Notre Dame were to form its own conference, Penn State would be the first call that I'd make, because you'd just lock down the East Coast with Notre Dame and Penn State. And I think it would allow Penn State to kind of be a bit of a trailblazer as opposed to just joining the Big Ten. I also think the ACC would be more attractive to the Penn State if it was about football, because if the ACC expands, and this is, again, Notre Dame goes, right? So this is working the premise that Notre Dame joins the ACC, which, again, I'm not saying it's going to happen, just for argument's sake. I think what Notre Dame and Penn State could kind of form a rivalry that would be, to me, more meaningful to people in Pennsylvania, the East Coast, than Penn State, Ohio State, number one. Number two, I think that you kind of create like an ACC North, right, which would have Notre Dame, Penn State, Syracuse, Boston, a lot of schools that are more like-minded with Penn State, meaning like geographically, again, it's Harrisburg, Pennsylvania's. You go east, and there's a lot more rivalries, in my opinion. There's a lot more games in the past between Penn State and Syracuse, and Penn State and West Virginia, and Penn State and Pitt, and a lot of ACC schools than there is from Penn State and the Big Ten. So I think those things could have helped, but I don't think that. But I still think they work in the Big Ten. I think they have a more of a Big Ten feel to it. State school, big school, north to Midwest-ish. I think it fits there. Nebraska never fit there. Geographically, traditionally, all those kind of things. And so that's why I don't think they're the same thing. That's a great question, Mark. And I appreciate the super chat very, very much. All right, let's get back down to get back up some more questions. Thank you for that. Again, Mark, that was a really, really good question. Let's get back up here to some more questions here. Let's see. We were talking about Jimmy Clausen a little bit ago. Tommy Guns with the super chat. Get him, Benny. All right. I don't know what that was in reference to, but hopefully it was when I was trying to get him to argue with me a little bit and defend why he would go with 2005 over 2018. All right. So we got to John Lynch's question about Cade Madden. I think that is where we left off. Okay, let's get to here. Chad Williams asks, is this team closer to 11 wins or 9 wins? I would, if you're asking me, I'd say 11. Looking at regular season, I'd say 11. Joseph Barrett says, Brian, in your opinion, what caused Don Brown's demise at Michigan? Was it not a sound scheme, or did he ultimately get figured out? I think it's a combination of 3 things, Joseph, and I think 2 of them you discussed. Number 1 is, it's not an incredibly sound scheme, but it's not like Tenuta's and Van Gorder's. I think the problem with the scheme is not so much that it's inherently unsound. I think at times it can be, but it's not like that. It's more Brent Venables than it is Brian Van Gorder. The problem is this. He was way too freaking stubborn with it. And I look at was it the 2018 game? Yes, it was the 2018 game. He just came out and said, we're going to run our defense and we're going to play man coverage and we're going to come out. And he did not have the players that could match up. And this is why I thought going into the game they were going to get killed by Ohio State. Because I'm looking at the speed that Ohio State has, and I'm watching their corners who couldn't run with Notre Dame's receivers, right? Who were big and fast and vertical, and they were just running past Michigan guys. Remember, Alizé beat him for a big play. Fink beat him for a big play. Boykin beat him for 2 big plays. Chase beat him for a big play on a cross, just outran him on a crossing route. They couldn't hang with Notre Dame's speed. And then you look at those little fast guys working left and horizontally against Ohio State. They had no chance at running with them. But he still said, hey, we're going to play man, we're going to blitz all day. It was a terribly, terribly poor game plan because it was just him saying, we're going to do what we do. His lack of ability to adjust to his personnel ultimately is, to me, what did it. And that factors in, Joseph, to the third part about it. And yeah, I mean, you always kind of have people figure out to a degree, and that's how adaptation comes and all that. But the third part of it, Joseph, is if you're going to run that scheme and be successful, you better have really good players. And it worked early on at Michigan because he inherited a great defensive defensive roster. When you look at Michigan, I think Don Brown's first year was, I believe, 2016, right? I'm looking it up right now. I believe 2016 was his first year at Michigan. Yes, that was his first year at Michigan. I'm going to go tell you some of the names that he inherited at Michigan on that team. And it'll just kind of show you that his defenses were really successful when he didn't have to recruit that roster. So let's go look at 2017. Jabril Peppers, first-round pick. Taco Charlton, first-round pick. Chris Wormley, third-round pick. Jordan Lewis, third-round pick. Delano Hill, third-round pick. Those are 5 defensive players that were first, second, or third-round picks. Ben Gideon was a fourth-round pick. Ryan Glasgow was a fourth-round pick. And Jeremy Clark I don't even think started on the team, was a 6th-round pick. So 8 of their players were drafted that's 2017 draft. And then in 18, you had Maurice Hurst was drafted. And so you look at it and you say, man, that's some really, really good players. He also, that first class that got brought in with Devin Bush and Rashawn Gary was part of that too. But the problem is after that first class, He also inherited Chase Winovich, although he wasn't, I don't think, a huge player on that team. That first recruiting class was really good because it was off of his reputation, and Jim Harbaugh hadn't quite burned his reputation yet. Michigan had a pretty good team that year. His work on the recruiting trail after that was lazy, and they relied on I forget his was it Patridge, the guy from New Jersey that was at Paramus Catholic. They relied on him to do a lot of recruiting, and so he went and got a lot of Jersey kids, and they got a lot of big name kids, but not guys that necessarily fit Don Brown's system, because Don Brown, simply put, was a lazy recruiter, if we're being honest about it. And so the talent level just continuously like dried up, after that 2016 team. And then once that 2016 recruiting class was gone, again, that he didn't necessarily have a huge hand in putting together. It was more about his reputation plus a great season for Michigan. Those things kind of factored into it, into why, because that, if you remember correctly, that I believe was the year where Michigan, I'm going to look at this real quick. Yeah, that was the year that Michigan, remember 2016 was also the year that Michigan played at Ohio State and took Ohio State to overtime and should have beat them. That was the 4th-and-1 play that everybody got up in arms about. So Michigan was riding a wave at that point in time. And I think they were in the top 3 going into November. They were undefeated going into Iowa. Remember, they lost to Iowa on November 12th. They were undefeated up at that point in time. They'd beaten Colorado. They beat Penn State. They beat Wisconsin. They were a really good team that year. And they were never the same after that because they lost all the players that they inherited. That's when they inherited a lot of those players. And once they were gone, his recruiting wasn't as good. And I think that ultimately, that combined with his stubbornness is what led to his demise, more so than a inherently flawed scheme. It was an inherently flawed scheme in that he wouldn't adjust it. It wasn't an inherently flawed scheme the way that no matter what Brian Van Gorder did, his scheme was flawed. I feel the same way about John Tenuta. I don't feel that way about Don Brown. I feel that Don Brown he was too arrogant to say, hey, we're going to have to make sure that we're building this around the players. It was always up to the players to figure out what to do. And I don't think you can win that way. Hey, Bob, so sorry if I've already posted or discussed, but where do you currently think Cardinal Tate ends up? My prediction right now is on Notre Dame, and right now I haven't gotten any information to tell me otherwise. Got another super chat down here. Let's see here, and that is just a super chat. So Sean Higgins, appreciate you very much. I very, very much. And Sean is also a member of our message board. So I really appreciate that, Sean. I really do. I appreciate you being with us today, and I appreciate the super chat very, very much. Let me get back up here some questions. Okay. Chad Williams says, Tommy Guns, BK teams always has a stinker or two in a season. I'm afraid with the stretch of games, Whiskey, Cincy, VTech, USC, North Carolina, if they navigate 5-0, I'll agree with you, Tommy. Yeah, so I don't agree with you. Always have a stinker or two. What was the stinker in 2018? Right? They won all those games. I mean, yeah, they didn't play well in a couple games. Vandy, Ball State, Pitt, but they won. When they did show up in 2018 was when they played ranked teams. 2020, same thing. Did they have some bad games against bad teams? Sure. But they didn't have bad games when they played the good teams. That's something that we haven't seen from BK's teams the last few years. The only exception is the Michigan game, which if they get into another rainstorm, yeah, I'm going to get nervous because they haven't shown that they can handle that very well. Well, they're like 0-3 when they get real bad rain, right? Clemson in 2015, NC State in 2016, then Michigan in 2019. But I think, Chad, based on some of your recent comments, I think you're kind of falling victim to some of the outside stuff about Notre Dame. I feel like you're still holding you're either holding them to a standard that not everybody else is held to, number one, or B, you're still holding them to standard a pre-2017 standard. And I don't think I'm just not going to go with you there. You'd have to go back to 2017 to really find what you're talking about. And you say you followed up with a stinker could be a game that they should win easily and don't, i.e. Ball State and Louisville, but they won those games, right? I throw Vanderbilt and Pitt into that category from 2018. Louisville, obviously, from 2020. But they won those games. They haven't had the stinkers against the teams that you think are capable of beating them. When they went on the road those are the games when they've been their most locked in the last few seasons. So that's why I don't necessarily agree with that premise. But we'll find it. The nice thing, Chad, we're now 9 days away from kickoff. So we're going to find out, right? We're going to find out. And I think the thing you and I would both agree on is that we hope that doesn't happen. And whether we think it will or won't, we hope it doesn't happen. And I think you would admit you enjoy being wrong, right? And so I don't feel that about this team. I think Notre Dame has proven that they're going to – I mean, their worst team in the last 3 years lost 2 games. So they'd have to be worse than – this have to be their worst team in the last several years for Notre Dame to get to that point. Some more questions. Here we go. I'm trying to find some more questions. Got a lot of. I love the conversations you guys have. It really, I do love this community. Just sometimes it causes a little bit of a pause because I got to find some questions. Eric Ward of the comment: I would have loved to see Clausen on a good team. If he went to USC, he would have won the Heisman. I don't know about that, but yeah, he I think he would have been. He would have got a lot more love and respect. No question about it. Here we go. Zach Martin. I spent my 20s coaching 18 and under college and semi-pro baseball in a lot of small Midwestern college towns. The ultimate battle: Applebee's coaches versus Chili's kids. Any similar dumb fun battles for you coaching? No, not for me, because we always had those visits kind of planned out when we went on the road. But we've had some in the coach's office. I'm not going to lie. We've had some deals where coaches say, hey, we're going to go to this buffet place. And I'd be like, come on, man. Like, can we please go somewhere else or somebody else would? So no, none with the kids. It's pretty, I could imagine though. I mean, I could imagine that being an interesting deal. Chief Brody, Brian Kelly defense with Charlie Weiss offense. Anyone? Ooh. Yeah, that'd be fun. That'd be like the 05, 06, and then maybe the 09 to a degree, but the O-lines weren't great on those teams. But yeah. How about this? A Charlie Weiss offense with a Harry Heastand offensive line and a recent Brian Kelly defense. How about that? You like that one, Brody? I would like that one. Benjamin Karcha, what interesting way can Notre Dame use its tight ends this year? I don't know if I'd say interesting. I would just like to see them use them more all over the field. Last year it was more short to intermediate, crossers and options, some slides. I would like to see more, maybe some wheel routes, a lot more seam routes. I'd like to see a lot more deep drags across the field as opposed to just the short stuff. And I would like to use the other receivers for clear outs for the tight ends. Something we didn't see a whole lot last year, and moving the pocket and getting the tight ends involved in that. I think there's some things they can do there. I'd like to see a couple screens, to be honest with you, the tight ends, things that they've done in the past but haven't recently. So yeah, I would. Those are things I'd like to see. No question about it. Chad Williams, Drew Lock got hosed. Chad, you and I. One of the reasons that I like to answer your questions is because you bring a different perspective a lot of times, and you don't bring the whole everything is awesome kind of approach. I like that we have multiple viewpoints on the show, and that's why I call on you a lot and kind of push back on the stuff you say, because I like that. I enjoy that difference of opinion kind of thing. This is one where we agree. I think Drew Lock got hosed, no question. And Tommy Guns, you know. That's not true. Edward says, do we know anything more about the injury suffered by Maris Lewis out for the season? I mentioned this earlier. I'm going to say it again for the people that weren't here at the beginning. We don't know the answer to that. There's been people have told me he's out for the year. People have told me it's just, he'll be back in November. And the latest thing I heard today was 4 weeks. The answer is we don't know. And I don't know if they're at the point yet where Notre Dame knows at this point. They might find out in the next day or two because they've had to let the swelling go down in the injury. It happened Wednesday night, so you're probably getting into that zone where you could maybe start having a better answer. We'll find out. But right now I do not have an answer on that. Tommy says, once Brian hires me and teaches, shapes, and molds me into the top recruiting reporter, you all get a lot more stuff. Yeah, but see, you want me to hire you, but then you complain about the fact that we have ads, which help make us money at the beginning of our show. So I'm not sure what you want there, Tommy. Obviously giving Tommy a hard time. Edward says, according to your classification system, what kind of receiver is Jafar Armstrong? He'd probably be a slot at Notre Dame. I mean, if that's what you're referring to, classification system. I think he was a better running back than he was a receiver, to be honest with you. Chad Williams, Deke Cooper was good. I liked Deke. I don't know if he would, because wasn't he kind of like a Johnny Sanders some years and like Benny Gil? No, was he with Benny Gilbo? I can't remember. But yeah, he was good, but some of the other safeties I don't remember being as good. Jeff Hopel, there were a few games I needed updates. Yeah, so Jeff and Tim were Notre Dame fans. Always love that. Chad Williams says, is Kevin Austin a poor man's version of Terrell Austin? Same body type, running style is the same. I mean, like body types, I mean, in those areas, yeah. I mean, and you use poor man's. I don't know if I hate that expression. I understand why you're using it, and I agree with it. But it just – you have to kind of do it because otherwise if you say he's like Terrell Owens, people think, oh, so you're saying he's going to be a Hall of Famer. And you're clearly just trying to refer to the skill set. And, yeah, I would say that. Christopher Sally, Styles and Lindsey seem like they will be getting quality playing time this season. Is that because of their talent, the wide receiver room talent, or has there been a change to the approach in preparing receivers? I'm not sure I follow the change to the approach in preparing receivers. I mean, Lindsey has played in the past. Lindsey would have played a lot more last year if he wasn't hurt. He played when he was healthy in 2019. He played a lot, got the ball a lot. So they've always kind of wanted him to be part of that. He just hasn't been able to stay healthy. Lindsey, to me, is more about just the lack of depth at the position, and there's been some injuries, and the fact that he is talented. And I hope that it's a change in philosophy. I hope so, but I can't tell you that until we get to the season. Chad Williams says, hey, BD, do you know Corey Vance from Lima? The name does not ring a bell. He's Liam Gaming says, is Prince Collie, if Prince Collie is a quick learner, can he be playing meaningful role by the Cincy game? If he's a quick learner, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Especially now with the injury to Maris Luafau, no question. John Erickson says, sorry if you've talked about this before, but do you prefer a quarterback under center or shotgun, and why? I personally am someone who likes both. I think there's a need for both, just for my style of offense, not need for any college team, a need for both for what I like to do. So I'm a shotgun guy. I think you can run a good offense under center. I think being under center limits you in today's game a little bit with a lot of the quick throws. You know, it's harder to do RPOs under center. It's harder to do some of the quick game under center just because teams are so much more spread out defensively than they were in the West Coast offense. But you can still do it. But I just – and part of that, too, is just as a quarterback, I like being in shotgun because I could see the whole field more. And you could see the whole field before the snap. You could see the whole field better at the snap because, you know, you get the snap in a shotgun and you just kind of turn, but you can kind of still see everything. Where under center, you do a 5-step drop. I mean, your first step, you kind of got to really get that reach step to almost where that's where you say the blind side of there's no blind side in the shotgun. There's not. I mean, because you can see it. There is a blind side because if you're under center and you take that first big step, if that defensive end beats that left tackle, you don't see him until he's 3-4 steps down the field. And sometimes you never see him because he beats you out wide, and because they're taught to come to your throwing shoulder, and if they're trying to attack your back shoulder, you're never going to see him. So yeah, that's why for me. But I also think that being in shotgun allows you to do more read zones. It allows you to do more RPOs. It allows you to. It's even easier to get your quarterback outside the pocket. I just think in today's game, where forcing teams to defend the width of the field, controlling the backside edge, it's really good for controlling the backside edge. It's a lot harder to control the backside edge with the quarterback under center. You've got to do it with a tight end or a second back or a bootleg. But to me, you can do it with the quarterbacks just as eyes and just as simple as knowing that you're going to run some read zones. So that's why I personally like being on the shotgun. But again, They're successful offenses that line up under center a lot. It's not one's better, one's worse. It's just your preference and then building around it. And just for me, John, I personally am a shotgun guy. Domer Grizz, getting out of a meeting and catching up on your answers to my previous questions. Great data on dropping the Viper. I'm always impressed by how quickly you find these stats and details. That's because I know where to go. And that's, I appreciate that, Grizz. I do. Matt Romero says college football. Let me get it up here. Matt, there we go. College football is not very popular in Colorado, but everyone tuned in for the Buffs Huskers rivalry each year. The good old days. And that's exactly another point I made. Just Nebraska got away from all the places that viewed them as nobody in the Big Ten cares about Nebraska. Nobody in Big Ten country cares about Nebraska and never have. It was a money decision that destroyed the program. And yeah, they've raked in lots of money, but they destroyed their football tradition. And that's sadly what Texas and Oklahoma are doing. Richard Robinson, great discussion, Coach. If Irish go unbeaten, will they get slotted above 4? Thank you. I would love to avoid Bama until the title game. It just depends on what happens everywhere else. If they're undefeated and there's 3 other undefeated teams, potentially no. But I would imagine if they're undefeated, they'll be. I mean, look, when the one time, see, this is the funny thing is Notre Dame has to, like ESPN had just a garbage article out the other day from somebody, Heather Dinich, who I normally like. It's going to be Notre Dame's going to have to go undefeated because they don't have that, extra data point playing I'm like, the only time they've had an extra data point, they lost by 24 points and still made the playoff, right? So if Notre Dame wasn't in the conference, they would have been ranked higher in the playoff last year. They wouldn't have had to play elevate. It actually being in the conference hurt Notre Dame last year. So it's just, but they hold on to those talking points, and it doesn't matter how much life changes or how much data shows them that they're incorrect. They just hang on to it. But if Notre Dame's undefeated, I'll be surprised. The only time they've gone undefeated, they were and again, that includes the conference title game. They were, I think, a 3 seed in 2018. Papa Rose says, shoot, in 1988, I was listening to other schools' fans calling Notre Dame Free Shoes University. The gate was real. I don't remember Notre Dame. I remember people calling Florida State that. I don't remember anyone calling Notre Dame that. Interesting. John DeCristio says, Penn State works better in the ACC. Rivals, Pitt, BC, Virginia Tech, and Notre Dame. I agree. Irish for life. Just got back from fetching our 4-legged child. I got to actually go let mine in. I left them outside this entire time. Not irresponsible. We have a fenced-in backyard, so I just left the door open because my wife's not here. Thanks to Brian and Vince for all you do. IB Nation is the best. Thank you, Irish for life. I appreciate you very, very much. Michael Johnson, I remember when Florida State, Penn State, and Notre Dame were all – yeah, and it wasn't just those 3. Miami was independent, West Virginia, Syracuse, Louisville, South Carolina. I mean, all those teams were independent the last time Notre Dame won a title. Pitt was independent, I believe, also the last time Notre Dame won a national title. Sean Higgins in and out today. Have a good weekend, fellas. Same to you, Sean, and to the ladies on the show, because we actually do surprisingly have a number of ladies, which I'm very happy about. I wish we could find some more. Gabe Weiss, how concerned are you in the coming years with the offensive line? I'm especially concerned about the depth with the offensive line. I'm very, very, again, concerned from a standpoint of, can Notre Dame play the level that they need to play? I'm concerned. Yes, they haven't recruited the way that they need to from a depth standpoint, and the development is obviously a question. Oh, here's one. Gabe Weiss, also letting you know right now, as a current Ball State student, Ball State will go into Happy Valley and upset Penn State this year. Chirp, chirp. That is going to be interesting. Very, very interesting. That would be a fun game to watch them get beat. That would be really fun. I would love that. I do not like Penn State, in case you haven't noticed. Well, I should say I don't dislike Penn State. I dislike Penn State fans for the most part. Gabe Wise also got to hop back out, but can't wait to watch the replay. Love the show and the people involved. Have a great weekend, everyone. Same to you, Gabe. Appreciate you being on. Liam Gaming, is Carmody really stepping it up to get back up roll, or is he just the tallest midget in the room? No, he's stepping up. He's playing well. He is. was Chris Partridge. Chris Partridge played for and then coached at Paramus Catholic. He coached Rashawn Gary and what was the kid's name? Chris Singleton, I think is the other kid's name. That the middle linebacker they got from that team. He got a lot of New Jersey kids to come to PC, and then he took them within Michigan. I graduated PC a few years ahead of him. So yes, and that was where a lot of their top recruits came from, and it was from him, not Don Brown. Tim Sully, 88. I was 21 that year. Wow, thanks for letting me play in your sandbox. See, so I'm not the only old person in the show. I appreciate that. Irish for Life, Brian, how confident are you that the Notre Dame O-line will hold up this season? Hold up. I think they'll be at least solid. I do. I think they'll be at least solid. I don't think they're going to be bad. I think they're going to at least be solid. The question is how good are they going to be? All right, let's get back to this. Chief Brody, if I miss anything about being a college athlete, it's out-of-state bus trips with my friends, playing the game we all loved at a high level. Yeah, those were road trips were fun. Road trips were fun. I liked after games too. Those were when we won. Those were fun too, because then you kind of just could. That was a one time for that 24 hours afterwards. It was never 24 hours. It was usually like till the next morning. You could just kind of okay, and then the grind started again the next day. Indy fan 8807. Who is Indy's best cornerback currently on the roster, and do you think Hart can bring the same level of play as McLeod did last year? Currently, the best cornerback on the roster. Talking to sources, it's Cam Hart. I don't know if I have an answer because I don't think I saw. We haven't seen Cam Hart play. Tariq Bracy had a down year last year, and Clarence Lewis was solid, but that's it. I don't know. I think they're two most talented right now of the veterans are Hart and Bracy. We'll have to see who steps up. But my sources say it's Cam Hart. We'll find out if that's true or not, but that's what my sources have told me. Irish for Life, how is Tommy Reese's health after his appendix? I've actually had a chance to reach out to some people around him, and seems to be doing better. Good spirits and all that stuff, so he seems to be doing better. So that's a good thing. Tim Jones is not Notre Dame related, but do you believe in any college football related conspiracy theories? I fully believe the 06 Outback Bowl was rigged. I have to think about that one, Tim. What was the 2006 Outback Bowl? I'm curious about that one. I'm going to look that one up. That was Florida State and Iowa. I don't remember that one. Or are you talking about the? Yeah, I'd be curious which one. I mean, talking about the Florida Iowa game. I'm not sure about that. Conspiracy theories. Oh gosh, I mean, I think there's been home refs that have done bad things. I don't believe in conspiracy theories like in college football, like the way that I do in the NBA, because I think it's so much harder to control a game from an officiating standpoint in college football than it is in the NBA. But I still feel like, there's been some. I have to think about some. I still think about that clipping call against Rocket, but no, I don't know. I'd have to think about that. I think the conspiracies I view, I don't know if they call them conspiracy, but like the NCAA just doesn't care about cheating. They don't. If Notre Dame never would have self-reported their violations, nobody would have known. They could have just dealt with it internally, and no NCAA wouldn't have cared. It's when they bring it publicly that then the NCAA acts like they give a rip, which they don't. But I'd have to think about that, Tim. I'm sure I do. I don't. None that jump off the top of my head, to be honest with you. Marquis Stewart says, it seems Notre Dame fans don't get as hyped about beating USC anymore, especially after the run that USC had on us in the Pete Carroll era. Whose biggest rivalry, in your opinion? USC is mine. Rivalry for me, Mark, it's USC. I think the problem with that, Mark, and I don't disagree with you. I think Notre Dame fans enjoy beating USC. I don't think they get the supreme joy out of it that I did in the Holtz era, for example. Because when Notre Dame beat USC in the Holtz era, they were usually beating a ranked team. Now, USC ended up being a little overrated at times, but you think about some of the big wins and the Notre Dame USC in 1988, for example. That was 1 versus 2. Notre Dame's playing for a national championship. You look at 1989, Notre Dame was number 1, USC was number 9. Another Notre Dame win. In 1990, Notre Dame was ranked number 7, USC was number 18. You look at 1991, Notre Dame was ranked USC was actually unranked that year. See about 92. They went out to USC. Notre Dame was number 5. USC was number 19. And then in 1993, USC was unranked again in 1993. So, but in most of those stretches, USC was ranked. A couple times they were ranked in the top 10. Most times they were ranked in the top 20. So you were beating a good USC team. Has Notre Dame beat a ranked USC team in the last decade? That's been the problem. Is like USC hasn't been very good in some years. They were 8-5 in 19. They were 5-7 in 18. In 2017 they were good. Like that's the one game where you like, but what's the one game that Notre Dame fans talk about beating USC? Still, it's the 2017 game. Why? Because that was a really good USC team. And so, Mark, I think that would be the reason why people don't get hyped as much about it, because they were 5-6 in 2018. You're supposed to beat a 5-6 team, right? And they ended up 5-7 because Notre Dame beat them. So, but I think that would be the reason why. For me, it's USC. I'd be curious what other people think. It's still USC for me. No question. I just wish that USC was better, and then Notre Dame was beating a better USC team. Nolan Esparza, this has nothing to do with anything, but when you mentioned 2009, it made me think of Golden Tate diving into the Michigan State band to celebrate, one of the great all-time great rivalry memories. That's a rivalry that I would like to see back. I did like Purdue and Michigan State are my two favorite Big Ten rivalries. If I can only have one of them, I'd probably play Michigan State. I would much rather have a rivalry with Michigan State every year than I do with Michigan. I do not care at all about having a rivalry with Michigan. And they don't have as long of a rivalry with Michigan as they do Michigan State. There have been some bigger Notre Dame-Michigan games in the last 30, 40 years because Michigan's been better, but there's more to it than that. Okay, Christopher Shaw said, I meant Colsey, not Lindsay, referring to freshman receivers. Yeah, but we haven't seen them play yet, Chris. I guess I'm waiting to see if they're actually going to play. We're still in camp mode where we're hearing a lot of the rumblings. I want to see what it is when we actually get to season. Michael Campbell asks, is Brian Kelly fearful of scoring too many points on opponents when it's possible? I think we could use some killer instinct on the offense. Nobody hold back back on us. I don't think it's afraid of scoring too many points. I think he's been conservative in that because they've had a good offensive line and they've had good defenses that he's afraid of making mistakes. And I think the criticism he got in his first 5-6 years for not running the ball enough and so look, the only year we're good is 2012 and you're in the ball all the time. I think he bought that hype, and I don't think he should have. And I think it's become so don't make a mistake driven that you have to be aggressive and take some chances to score a lot of points. I think it's more about that, Michael, than it is about him being afraid to score points. Sean Mattingly, besides Patterson Fisher, who in your opinion will be the exception, Are you saying exceptional? Who, in your opinion, will be exceptional on the offensive line? I don't know if anyone's going to be exceptional. I think it's just going to be – I just need guys to be solid. I don't care about exceptional. I want 5 guys doing their job and playing good football. If you give me that, that'll be a great O-line. 2 exceptional guys and a bunch of guys not playing exceptional is going to not be as good of a line. Tommy Guns, are you a fan of the pistol formation only as a wrinkle, not as a full-time offense? But I think if you're going to be a shotgun team, you should have some pistol worked in there, no question. John Mattingly, what is your way too early predicted Final Four? Check back tomorrow. We're actually going to give our tomorrow at 2 p.m., Saturday 2 p.m., August 28th, 2 p.m. We're going to have our season preview. We're going to preview Notre Dame. We're going to go through the schedule. Here's who we think are going to beat, who they're going to lose to. We're going to give our season prediction, and then we're going to give our playoff predictions. And then we're going to expect you all to make your same predictions and for both of those as well. Tommy Guns, what is your opinion on comparing football to war? Obviously, you're not trying to kill an enemy in football, having taken part in both. I don't mind it as much as I used to. I don't mind it as long as you're using it appropriately. Look, there's a lot of military terms in football, but also football is about Drew Singleton, by the way. Yes, so that was the linebacker. I said Chris, sorry. But back to Tommy, back to your point. I think there's a lot of carryover between strategies. And that's where I compare it is it's the strategy involved, but also the camaraderie that goes into being a great football team. Football is about, you've got to have great preparation. Well, think about war. You don't just, you're on Tuesday, you're hanging out eating Cheetos, and then you go fight a war on Wednesday. It doesn't work like that, right? You're trained. You go through all the scenarios. You learn how to fire a gun. You learn strategies. You learn all these things. You prepare. You're going to spend more time in training than you are fighting the war, right? Same thing for football. It's about that brotherhood, that camaraderie of the guy next to you. Hey, and how often do you hear military people say, when you're in war, you're not fighting for your flag so much. You are, but it's in the battle. It's not about that. It's not about the goal necessarily. It's about that man next to you, right? I hear that all the time from my family and friends who are in the military. Now, again, there's always we're thinking about winning. We're thinking about this battle being victorious. We're thinking about, the strategy and all that. But it's also about, like, once you get in it, it's about that man next to you and about knowing that I got to count on him and he's got to count on me. And then on down the line, and it's the same thing in football. And so I think in those regards, there's a lot of things that kind of go into it. I think the mental part of it is similar because football is such a physical and emotional grind. It's why we talked in the past about how I feel like with football, you have a lot of guys that deal with emotional scars and battles after the fact when it's no longer there. Not the scars aren't what happened during it. The scars are that it's not there anymore. And you see that a lot with people in the military too. So I'm okay with. I rather enjoy and will use comparing war to football as long as you're doing it correctly and using it in the correct context. And I think most people are smart enough to know that when I say, hey, football is like battle, you're not, it's obviously you're not pulling out guns. This isn't the last Boy Scout, right? You're not, it's not, I feel like not life or death. People's freedoms aren't on the line, all those kind of things. But I shouldn't have to explain that to people. Neither should you, right? People should have some common sense. But I think in some other ways, there's a lot of parallels between it that you don't see in other sports. And that's one thing that I find to be very, very unique. John Erickson says, thanks for the answer, Brian. Pretty much agree, but must admit I lose it when I see shotgun on third one. You're not alone, buddy. But to me, it doesn't. Being in shotgun's not the problem. It's like with anything else. It's the play call or the play execution that's the problem. Larry says, Freeman will motivate Reese's body to generate another appendix. Well done, buddy. Very, very well done. All righty. Humberto Rodriguez, what are the chances of Marcus Freeman being our coach in waiting after what Coach Brian Kelly said? Sorry if this is already covered. We talked about this a little bit yesterday, Humberto, and I don't think that's what Brian Kelly was saying. I don't think Brian Kelly was like letting the cat out of the bag. I think it was said over the summer. It was before camp, I believe. It's being taken out of context. That's just my opinion. That doesn't mean that I don't think Marcus Freeman could or would or should be the coach in waiting. I believe if he does a good job coaching this year, he absolutely should be the coach in waiting. I don't want it to be public. I've said this before. I don't want it to be public. I want it to be between Swarbrick, Kelly, and Freeman. But what are the chances of it? If Marcus Freeman puts a good product on the field this year, I'd say the chances are relatively high. But again, I think look, if they're going in thinking he's going to be the coach in waiting, and the defense gives up like 26 points a game this year, right, we can all agree that's not going to happen. He needs to go out and improve it. And somebody brought this up yesterday on the message board, and my response was, if you think that Marcus Freeman should be the head coach now, based on what he's done now, would you have been okay if Brian Kelly retired after the 2020 season, walked away, so you know what, another playoff berth, let's say he has having some health problems or whatever. Hey, his son's in college now, right, playing at Grand Valley State. He says, you know what, I want to be a dad. I want to go do these other things. I just don't have it in me anymore. Let's just say he did that for argument's sake. Would you have been okay if Notre Dame would have hired Marcus Freeman away from Cincinnati and named him the head coach now, would you all be okay if Marcus Freeman was named the head coach today based on what he did in Cincinnati? So in January, he wasn't hired to be the D coordinator. He was hired to be the head coach. I think most people would not be okay with that. And so that's why I say I got to see him coach at Notre Dame first. I think he's going to do a great job. I do. I think everything's going to go how we all hope. But I just need to see him do it first. That's not an unrealistic expectation. Chief Brody says, my uncle was in the Michigan State marching band when Golden Tate dove in the band. He said he broke a girl's instrument. That's kind of funny. Oh, goodness gracious. Okay, here we go. Liam Gaming, over under 2.5 quarterback knockouts this year. I hope under. I don't like guys getting hurt. And I think those kind of create excuses for people. Well, our quarterback got hurt. Hopefully under. Grant Goodrich, assuming the offensive line is inferior to last year's line at run blocking, could the newfound explosive passing game allow the run game production to be better than expected? That's a great question, Grant. And yes, that's exactly right. You nailed it. You absolutely nailed it, Grant. I think that yes, there's two ways to have a great running game. One is to have a great blockers and great backs and great time, and that's what Notre Dame had last year. But as I've pointed out on film before, they were often outnumbered in the box because they didn't have the pass game. Does anyone think that North Carolina had a better offensive line than Notre Dame last year? I don't know anyone on the planet that knows anything about football that thinks that. But yet North Carolina rushed for more yards than Notre Dame. In the same league, they averaged more rushing yards per game. And they had 2 1,000-yard running backs. I'm going to pull up the numbers here real quick, okay? I want to make this point. North Carolina averaged 235.8 rushing yards per game, and Notre Dame averaged 211.1. That's 24-yard, almost 25-yard difference. North Carolina averaged 5.8 yards per carry. Notre Dame was at 5.0, and Notre Dame had a quarterback who was a much better runner than what North Carolina had. Ian Book last year, for example, ran for 485 yards. Sam Howell ran for 146. A big difference. Would anyone want to argue that Javonte Williams and Michael Carter are astronomically better than Kyron Williams and what Chris Tyree were, with the difference in Ian Book? Obviously, again, 300-plus yard difference between the quarterbacks. I don't think it is. The difference is the offense they ran was a perimeter RPO, get the ball outside, get the ball over top, stretch the field, attack down the field offense where you couldn't load the box the way you could against Notre Dame, which left more running lanes and bigger running lanes. And then the offense just had to do their job. And if Notre Dame implements their version of that strategy, which is, again, not air raid and all that, but just be more aggressive getting the ball to the outside, run and pass, but especially pass, run RPOs, take more shots down the field, stretch the defense vertically and horizontally, then I think that they're going to open up more run lanes. And with the backs they have, if the offensive line just does its job, they don't have to blow guys off the ball like they did in 2017 or like they did last year. Just do your job. There's going to be a more efficient and potentially explosive running game. So, Grant, you absolutely nailed that. That is a great observation and question. No question about it. Sky Shark says, how do you watch football the way a coach does? Is this a better question for the board? I guess I don't really understand the question. So if you could put it on the message board and elaborate a little bit on it, I'll gladly answer that. No question. I don't quite understand the question. Corey D. Brian, who do you think is the greatest NFL running back in history? To me, it's got to be Barry Sanders. Never been anyone like him. Corey, I don't really get into the whole greatest in history because I never watched Jim Brown play. I never watched some of the great backs. When I was old enough to appreciate Walter Payton, he was already kind of on the back half of his career. So other than highlights, I never saw Walter Payton. I think Barry Sanders was certainly the most electric running back of all time. Was he the greatest? I don't know. It's hard for me to say that he was definitely the greatest. He's certainly in the conversation. I guess I don't get into the whole greatest ever as much as some others. It's very rarely obvious. So, yeah, I just how do you compare what Bill Russell did to what Michael Jordan did? I mean, all the Jordan people say, oh, he's better than LeBron because rings, and he's better than Kobe because rings and all this kind of stuff. Well, Okay, well then Bill Russell's the greatest of all time, right? I mean, John Havlicek has more rings than Michael Jordan does, I believe. So in football, you definitely can't use that argument for any position other than quarterback. And I even think it's incredibly flawed there because it's more about your team. You know, Barry Sanders never played on great teams. What would Barry Sanders' career have looked like if he was with the Cowboys, for example? I don't know. Would that have been a bad fit for him because he couldn't just kind of freelance them? I don't know. I just know he was the most exciting back I've ever seen. I don't know if he was the greatest. And I think a lot of older people I know would say Jim Brown. A lot of people that are older than me, but not that much older than me, would say Walter Payton. And a lot of younger people say Barry Sanders or somebody like that. So I don't know if I could say the greatest. And the era's changed, but Barry Sanders was certainly the most fun to watch. There's no question about it. Rage Quit, Gale Sayers was freaking amazing. Yeah, again, another guy I never saw. And of course, and he was more like Terrell Davis in that he was a great for a really small period of time because of injuries. Yeah. Michael Campbell, can you write an article with a headline of the correct number of players that are playing who are returning key players for the 2020 season for offense and defense, major errors being told nationally? I've done that, Michael. I've written several articles about that. So, and I've talked a lot about that. Look, Michael, at this point in time, anything I write, there's nothing I'm going to write now that I haven't already written about this team. And there's nothing I'm going to write that's going to change anybody's mind. It's going to have to be, they're going to have to show it, right? They're going to have to show it. And then when Notre Dame's more successful than we think, then we can engage with those people on, oh, here's why you were wrong in the first place. And that'll be a fun conversation to have. No question about it. Omar Austin, the football genie grants Brian a wish for one bold prediction, offensive defense to come true. Which do you pick, and what is Notre Dame's record? If I could have one bold prediction wish, this is going to be easy. It would be that Notre Dame's offense is as good as LSU's was in 2019. That's my bold prediction. Because if that happens, Notre Dame's going to win a championship. So, yeah, and they're going to get Dante Moore, and they're going to get Cardinal Tate because of that offense. So if I could do that, then, yeah, that'd be my one. That'd be my one bold prediction, is that Notre Dame is as good as LSU in 2019 on offense. And their record would be 14-0. That's what their record would be. And they would win a title. And Brian Kelly would get a big old statue, and Tommy Rees would win offensive coordinator of the year, and he'd have NFL teams offering him jobs and all that kind of stuff. That would be a lot of fun. A lot of fun. No question today. Corey D, if Jim Brown played today, he would be just another good back. No. Come on, man. No. I've heard people say the same thing about if Larry Bird played. Come on, man. Just no. B Straw, hey Brian, loving the message board. You signed up, I believe, over the last week, Looking at the season, what is your top game that could be on upset alert, either an Indy game or anyone else? For me, for Notre Dame, it's Virginia Tech. That game concerns me a little bit for a lot of reasons, which we've talked about in the past. Nationally, I have Clemson on upset alert against NC State. That's one for me. There's a couple other. I'd have to go back and look. B Straw, because I went and did conference. I don't have anybody going undefeated this year in any league. So there's several games. There's a lot of teams bringing back a lot of starters, and I think that tends to make for really fun years. And some of the better teams aren't bringing back a lot. So I think I have everybody with at least a loss. And I think that's probably my boldest prediction in regards to that. Sahil Ray says, Coach D, why was BBG tenure such a failure? Did you think even in his prime when he won the Broyles, he was actually good or just in the right situation? How can a man who won the Broyles not even succeed at Bowling Green? This is a great question, Sahil. So number one, when he won the Broyles at Georgia, that was 02, something like that. Let me look that up. That was a long time ago. I'm just going to look that up because I want to be accurate with his tenure at Georgia. And he was at Georgia from 01 to 04. So yeah, it was early in his tenure. And so that was 2002. Yeah, so I was correct on that. And the game was different. It was a pro style game. The SEC was a running league. It was a between the tackles running league. Florida was really the only team doing things like that. It hadn't quite evolved to what it's become now. And that style worked for him. The other thing, that's number one. And he had great players. That's the other thing. Number two, he was not the same coach back then. His time in the NFL caused him to try to become a more creative coach. I was told a story about a game, where he was trying to find plays that they ran in the NFL to use in the middle of a game. I wish I could go into greater detail because it was the most incredible story I've ever been told. I'd have fired him on the spot if I was Brian Kelly. Just some absurd stories I've seen where he was basically trying to run that NFL defense, and that's not who he was. And you see this all the time in coaching, Sahil, is you'll see guys that are trying to run somebody else's offense or something they saw somebody else did. Or I was an assistant on this guy for 2 years, and so he tried to be Rex Ryan, but he ain't Rex Ryan. And you can't do that in college. You can't run that kind of NFL defense at college. You don't have enough time. You have kids, not professionals. You just can't do it. And that's what he tried to do. The other things that hurt him too was he was not a good person. He was a mean coach. He was a degrading coach. And when you combine that with the fact that kids didn't think he knew what the heck he was talking about, there was no respect there. He also didn't like to recruit. And so there was really nothing going for him at that point in time. And so it's kind of like Bob Diaco, right? Bob Diaco was a great defensive coordinator in 2012. He can't get a job now. He's not that old. He's in his 40s, I believe. Why? Because he hasn't adjusted with the times the way that other coordinators like Brent Venables and Dave Aranda and guys like that have. And that to me is an issue. B Straw, should Ricky Watters be considered for the NFL Hall of Fame? I'm going to my first thought is to say no, but I want to pull up his career a little bit. I'd probably lean towards no. I think Ricky was a really good back. He had 10,000 career yards. I feel the way that the NFL Hall of Fame is now, it depends on how you view the Hall of Fame. Do you view the Hall of Fame as being a really small, exclusive club where it's just truly the best of the best all time? Then I'd say probably no. If you view the Hall of Fame for what I think it should be, which is, trying to get a gauge for who were the best of an era, then I'd say yes. I would say yes. He never had any great season. Yeah, in 96, his second year in Philly, had 1,400 yards, 13 touchdowns. But, the thing that Ricky never got enough credit for was his receiving. He had over 4,000 receiving yards. And I think he had a long touchdown, I believe, in the Super Bowl, right, with San Francisco. So, yeah, it just depends on how you view the Hall of Fame. The way I think the Hall of Fame should be viewed, I think he is a Hall of Famer. The way that I think the NFL views their Hall of Fame, I don't think that he is. But I'd like to hear people's opinions on that. That'd be very interesting. Umberto with the super chat. I appreciate that very much. Best Notre Dame coverage on YouTube. I appreciate that very, very much. I just saw a chat. Mark E. Stewart. My wife and I were watching a show on ESPN2. My wife goes, "That looks like that Brian guy you watch on YouTube." I said Brian would never go on ESPN. Don't remember his name, though. Honestly, I would go on ESPN if they would let me debate with them. That would be that. If they were allowed me to kind of push back on their narratives, if they were allowed me to say what I say on my show, on their show, I'd go on there. My problem with ESPN isn't ESPN just as an entity. It's the way in which I used to love ESPN. It's the way that ESPN has become basically like the hype man for the SEC and for the NBA. Like they've become hype man for the products that they're trying to sell as opposed to being, and this is the problem that you have with ESPN. They try to portray themselves as news people covering the sports that they're dependent upon making money off of. And so you can't cover it. You can't be a journalist at ESPN and go do an expose on the SEC where you're showing the rampant cheating and scandals and all this kind of stuff because you'd be a masochist. You'd be tearing down the thing that pays your salary. That inherent conflict of interest is why I no longer respect ESPN. Yet they still continue to try to carry on that fallacy that they're giving real analysis when they're not. At least most of them aren't. If they were allowing me to come on and share my actual opinions on things, I'd go on ESPN. I'd go anywhere that wants to have an honest debate. As long as it's an honest debate and they allow me to say what I want to say. But if they were to try to do to me what I think they do with most people, which is you've got to kind of toe the company line, heck no, I'd never go on ESPN. I'm perfectly happy where I'm at with the community and the family that we have here. No question about it. Let me get down here some more as we kind of get closer. Indianapolis, best high school film you have ever seen, Brian. Back in the day, Marcus Dupree's high school videos were amazing. The only high school video, I have a friend of mine, good buddy of mine, would agree with you on that. He said Marcus Dupree's the best high school player he's ever seen. I'd still have to go with Ronald Curry. And again, I guess if you say film, I mean, I've seen some film of Ronald Curry also, but I also saw him in person. But yeah, it's still Ronald Curry. No question. John DeCrisio says, I live in Southern California, so USC is definitely my number one rival for Notre Dame. And he says, besides USC, has ruined too many national championship seasons for Notre Dame to forget. Connor Nepper says, Georgia hasn't won a championship since 1980. Why doesn't that get talked about? But they keep saying we're overrated. It's just comical. It's exactly what I was just talking about because Georgia's in the SEC. ESPN, could you imagine what would happen to ESPN? How many people they'd have to lay off if they lost the SEC? Like, let's just say hypothetically that, something happened and some law was passed that said all the contracts that they've signed with these conferences are null and void, and they have to have new contracts or something like that. And the SEC just decided to sign with Fox exclusively, like all their games are on Fox. ESPN, I think, would go under. They would. So why would they not hype up the league that they're financially dependent upon? That's the reality of it. And I just wish they were more honest about it. Hey, look, we're the hype man for this league, right? And that's just the reality of it. But they try to pretend that they're giving honest analysis, but in reality, they're not. Chief Brody says, in almost any given season, regardless of their respective records, I would rather lose to USC and beat Michigan. I think a lot of people would feel that way. Michael, thank you for the super chat, man. I really, really appreciate that very much. And Michael says, hey, Brian, being a fan of Notre Dame since 1963, I like trivia to teach the youngsters the history of Notre Dame football. So here's my trivia. Name the 8 Notre Dame quarterbacks who had more interceptions than career touchdowns. Ooh, that's a good – I don't know the answer to that, Michael. I would imagine it's a lot of guys from Tony Rice is one. I thought Joe Theismann was one, but I could be wrong on that. I'm going to pull that up here real quick. You see here. Yeah, Joe Theismann was one. So I got 2 of them. I'm not sure if I could name a lot of the others, to be honest with you. Yeah, so now I'm just I'm kind of cheating. I'm just typing in names now. So I honestly don't know the answer to that, Michael. I'd love to know the answer to that. I think I got 2 of them right. Terry Hanratty's another one, and I didn't know that one. I just looked that one up. I would imagine a lot of those quarterbacks were, because the game was different back then. It was so much more of a vertical game that you had those kind of things. So I would love for you to put those 8 names on there, Michael. I don't have that number. That would be very, Joe. I think Joe Namath threw more interceptions in the NFL than he did touchdowns, I believe. But again, different game. Gregory Gilbert with the super chat. I appreciate that very much. A bit late here today, but did you see where Kelly called Freeman the next head coach? It's not what he said. We talked a lot about that yesterday. I would encourage you to go back and look at that. But yeah, we saw that. I don't think that was the context that he was saying it, and I think he was saying more. It was more of a. It was more of a, he's going to be like the next head coach from my staff, more than it was he's going to be the next head coach of Notre Dame. I just doubt that Brian Kelly would give that away randomly over the summer in a interview with the Golf Channel. I just don't see it. I just don't see it. But we'll see. I wouldn't be opposed to it. I wouldn't want it to be made public, especially not now. And I would just rather see it be done privately, to be honest with you. I'm not opposed to the idea. It just has to be done the correct way. John Long said, yes, made the live chat. Got to listen on my way home. Thanks for being with us, John. Appreciate that. John Erickson, wonder how many players are still languishing in the transfer portal. That's a good question, John. I would like to know the answer to that too. I really would. John Long, question. What was Lou Samoji's favorite Notre Dame moment? Love the show. You guys are awesome. I feel like Vince is stepping up his game on IB. I agree. So this actually is an answer I know because Lou shared this with me. Well, at least this is what he told, the game that he talked about the most. It was the 1973 Sugar Bowl, I believe. Let me look. Let me make sure I'm correct on that. It was a game between Notre Dame and Alabama. I'm just going to make sure that I'm correct here. Yes, it was the 1973 Sugar Bowl, which was a game Notre Dame won 24-23. And it was a game where Tom Clements, I think it was it Robin Weber? Was that the name of the tight end that he hit? But Notre Dame was backed up in their own territory, and they ran a corner out I think it was Robin Weber for a first down that allowed Notre Dame to run the clock out. It was a really gutsy call. And Lou, I remember one time Lou made me stop working, which he never did. I always had to make him stop working to talk. And he brought me over and he showed me that play on YouTube, and he loved that game. It was a very formative game for him in his fandom for Notre Dame. That was the game he would always talk about the most. What was that one? So yeah, it's a good question. Neil Walker says, is there a player off the current 2 deep that you think will develop into a starter by season's end? I can't really point to one unless there's an injury, to be honest with you. It's like off the 2 deep, like guys in the 2 deep that could become starters. Sure. Guys that are not in the 2 deep that can become starters. Barring injury, Neil, I just don't have an answer to that one. I don't know if there would be a guy that's currently like a third teamer that could be that, unless I think the only position maybe we'd see it is like, yeah, it'd have to be an injury. It'd have to be an injury at this point in time. Chris Broughton says, I will listen to your live stream every day while I work in the baking sun. Thanks for keeping me going. You're welcome, Chris. And I appreciate you being part of what we do. And stay safe, all right? Make sure you put sunblock on, keep that thing safe, buddy. Appreciate you. Christopher Sally, other great high school film, Jadeveon Clowney, Percy Harvin, and Reggie Bush. Clowney's film was ridiculous. Yes, but Everett Golson beat him in the state championship game at Everett's senior year. Jay Clampin Investments, who is the worst player that has ever been a full-time starter at Notre Dame? Oh, boy. The worst player? Oh, man. There's guys you could pick from the 1995 to 2004 that would fit that. I mean, full-time starter? So you're not so you wouldn't count Evan Sharpley as a full-time starter like Pat Dillingham, right? Because they were replacing injured guys, correct? Boy, I have to think about that one. I'm going to think about that one and try and answer that maybe on the message board later, because I really can't think of who would the worst would be. Plus, I hate being negative like that. But yeah, I'd have to think about that. There's a couple linebackers that pop in my head. That's and I'm not talking about Joe Schmidt, because I think Joe Schmidt was a pretty good football player before the injury. Christopher Sally said, Alec A.M. Minor just committed to Stanford. No surprise. That's a really good pickup for them, by the way. I didn't want him at Notre Dame, but for Stanford, that's a really good – just like I didn't want Ernest R.J. Cooper from there. But for Stanford, that's a really good pickup. Really good pickup. Michael says, hint to my answers of my trivia question, 3-1 Natties and 2-1 Heismans. I got some of them. I got Theismann. I got Tony Rice. I would assume, since I'm a Heisman, obviously John Hewart, I would imagine is another one. So Paul Hornung, I would be a guess. If you're talking about Heismans, I guess would be one that I'd look at. So I'd be curious to see the answer. I want to see the answer. Connor Nepper says, I'm in the transition stage from a new QB and a new DC, which will be more important overall for this team. I think both will take a step forward. in the transition stage from a new quarterback and a new DC, which will be more important overall for this team. I think both will take a step forward. I would say the quarterback. Absolutely the quarterback. Absolutely the quarterback. So, Michael, okay, so we got Tony Rice, correct? We've got Terry Hanratty on this one. Got Joe Theismann on this one, right? So I'm going to look up a couple more. So since we're doing this, because now this is just going to stick in my head, and this is going to really bother me. So John Hewitt, let's see, John Hewitt. Nope, he was not one. Let's see, Paul Hornung, if he was on there. John Hewitt threw more touchdowns. Yep, Paul Hornung was another one. All right, I'm going to see. We did Hanratty, Rice, Joe Theismann, Paul Hornung. Let's see if Tom Clements is on there. I'm curious about that one. I'm curious to see the answer to this. Tom Clements is another one. Some really interesting ones. And I think Joe Montana was one as well. Let me pull up Joe Montana's college stats, but I believe Joe Montana threw more interceptions than he did. No, he was equal, 25 and 25. So I was wrong. Joe Montana did not throw more interceptions than touchdowns. He threw 25 each, according to Sports Reference. So yeah, I'd be curious to see what the rest of them are. I hope that you share that answer, Don. I'm not to it yet, but I hope you share that. That would be I'd love to see the answer to that. All right, let's see. Last couple questions before we get out of here. Connor Nepper says, my personal opinion is that Notre Dame needs an elite quarterback to get the trophy. No matter how good our team is, I need to witness a championship in my lifetime. I agree. I don't think it needs to be an elite quarterback per se. He needs to play like an elite player. There's a difference to me, meaning manage the offense at an elite level. It doesn't have to be Trevor Lawrence, if that makes sense. John Keever's offensive personnel group I'm most excited about is 21. That would be 2 backs, 1 tight end with multiple possibilities out of 10 and 11 formations. Yeah, I think all those will be good. But I really think that the 21 will be very interesting. Sparkling Swan, Alabama considers that 1973 game a national championship for the school, and they lost. Yeah, that's why I don't respect the numbers they put. Ooh, Johnny Lujak, that's another one from the answer earlier. Let's see what Johnny Lujak's college stats were. Johnny Lujak is another one. Okay, and then you said Angelo Bertelli. I would, yep, because of the era. Let's see, Angelo Bertelli. Angelo Bertelli college stats. And he would be another one. So we have 7 of them. We have Tony Rice, Terry Hanratty, Joe Theismann, Paul Hornung, Tom Clements, Johnny Lujak, and Angelo Bertelli. Does anybody know the 8th one? I'd be curious about this one. If Matt Romero, if BK ever gets a statue, it has to be of him red-faced yelling at the ref. No. Rob says, Brian, which coach of Davey, Willingham, and Weiss had more of a negative impact to the program? Willingham, because he didn't recruit. He was a terrible recruiter. As a coach, it'd be Davey because I think he had the long-term just mediocrity, and he was the first one that the coach talked down the program and how tough it was and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, that would be one. But to me, Weiss played a role in Kelly getting the program around because he left Kelly with such a talented team in some ways. John Erickson, funny thing about the 73 play was I think that may have been only pass Robin Weber called all. And Lou said, I don't know if it was the only pass, but he wasn't their primary tight end. Almost felt sorry for the Alabama D. Why would they possibly expect that? Let's see here. Jim Evans says, I just don't understand all the trashing of Ian Book since his departure. In your opinion, please give Book a letter grade as to how you think he fared during his time at Notre Dame. Well, there's 2 different ways to look at this, Jim. Number one is, grading Ian based on what the expectations were coming into Notre Dame. And did he get, how much he got out of his career. But if you're just going to talk about his play, B-. I think Ian Didn't lose you a lot of games, obviously, but I don't think he won you a lot of games either. And he definitely didn't beat teams that were good. Ian Book, I believe, at best was 500 against ranked opponents. And I mean, just that to me, that's not good enough. To be considered a great quarterback, you have to win big games. And he didn't win big games. And oftentimes played pretty bad in those big games. It's not trashing him. I don't trash players. The only person I've ever trashed here, I believe, is Brian Van Gorder, and he deserves it. An honest analysis, Jim, is not trashing someone. Honest analysis is just that. It's honest analysis. This isn't a fanboy site. This isn't a site where a bunch of Notre Dame fans, who Vince and I are, just talk about how great everything is in Notre Dame. We're football coaches. We're going to give you analysis first. That's always going to be the first place we come from when giving answers. Honest analysis. It's not personal. It's not anti-Ian Book. It's just calling it as we see it. And the fact of the matter is Ian Book was an average passer. His passing grade, probably be a C. His running grade, B+. You give a grade to his leadership, it's going to be pretty high. You give a grade to his toughness, it's going to be pretty high. Physical toughness is going to be pretty high. His passing grade, poor. Big game performance, poor. His running grade, higher. And it's all kind of factors into a guy that had a good overall record on a really good teams, but couldn't win the big games. That's a fact. Okay, here we go. Oh, Steve Berline's the 8th. Okay. Actually, no. So all good. You are cooking coach. Answer Rice, Theismann, Lujak, Hanratty. Horning. So you missed some. So Bertelli was one. He had 10 interceptions and 10 touchdowns and 14 interceptions. So it's actually more than 8 based on those numbers. Let's get to some last questions down here. And I'm not going to put that on there because I hate that nickname. Really, really hate that nickname. But somebody asked about Tommy Reese, and no, Tommy Reese had 60. And this is one of those frustrating things. Tommy Reese had 61 touchdowns and 37 interceptions. So he threw almost, 24 more touchdowns than he did interceptions. And in his last year as a starter, he threw over twice as many touchdowns as he did interceptions, 27-13. And I think that's going to be it. So great show today, everybody. I really appreciate everybody being a part of what we did today. Before you leave, hit the like button, subscribe button, notification bell. Sign up for the message boards. We've had about 4 people sign up during the show, which I'm thrilled about. But we're going to have some really fun stuff this year on the message board. The conversation is great. It's really been growing the last couple weeks. I'm very excited about it. If you're not a message board person, number one, you're going to want to sign up because we're going to have some videos that you're going to want to watch, number one. Number two, it is a way we can also just support the channel. You don't have to post if you don't want to. We do have a booster club. I've had people ask, how can I support your channel? I'm not a message board person. You can join the booster club, which you can also find at the message board. And, those are ways that you can continue to help us grow. And we're super appreciative to just your ordinary Joe for his new record donation, which we appreciate. But then also all the people that gave, whether it was $2 or $5 or whatever, it's your hard-earned money. And if you choose to give it to us in any way, shape, form, or fashion, we greatly appreciate that very, very much. We appreciate the community that we're building and the fact that you all are along for the ride. And I hope we're just getting started. So for Vince, I'm Brian. Have a great rest of your day. We'll see you tomorrow, 2 p.m., 2021 Notre Dame season prediction. And we're also going to make our college football playoff prediction. So join us then. We'll talk to you all again soon. Have a great rest of your Friday.